Hello, everybody. This is Kevin Asani, and you are watching The Progressive Square. Thank you so much for joining me, and it's really good to be with you guys tonight. We have some interesting stories to cover here. I just wanted to let you guys know before we get started to please check out my Patreon page, patreon.com/ProgBlacksmith. And if you can also remember to check out hashtag the Prog Square. That is on Twitter, and that'll direct you to all of my live broadcasts on Periscope, as well as every segment I post on YouTube. So let's get started here. So some of you may have heard that there was a little bit of a controversy going on regarding Tulsi Gabbard's position on healthcare, and this is something that actually a couple of progressives have gone after each other on and kind of disagreed on. One being a Tulsi supporter, and the other one being not so much a Tulsi supporter, maybe more of a, obviously more of a Bernie supporter, of course, because those are the people. If you've seen on Twitter, those are the people that are kind of going after Tulsi more, because they obviously. The Bernie supporters, such as myself, I also support Tulsi, but Bernie supporters such as myself are very concerned about the prospect of obviously Medicare for all existing, and we want to make sure that that's a policy that whoever the president is, regardless of progressive or not, that's something that we're going to push them on. And so the people that were going after each other it was down to two guys. Specifically, it was Mike Figueredo from Humanist Report and Nico House, who also has his own show as well. They were going at it on Twitter mostly. I think each of them posted a video. I believe Nico House's video addressed Mike Figueredo specifically. I don't believe that Mike Figueredo addressed Nico House. I haven't watched his video and I haven't had time. I only saw part of Nico's video, so I can't fully comment on what each of them said. However, they did address their grievances on Twitter, and I don't believe they have come to any kind of consensus or any kind of agreement on anything. Everybody is kind of begging them to, get along and kind of, debated on one show and stuff. I mean, if they would want to do that, they would probably need a moderator, but which has happened, before with two different parties when it comes to new media hosts. So I wanted to address Tulsi's position on Medicare for all. I have some issues with the way she has articulated her position. I do not. I don't think she's anti-Medicare for all. I believe that seems to be what a lot of the people do think. That are going against her, so they think like, well, she used this language, it's not that good, and it needs to be better, blah blah blah. So, but let me play you some of her statements. So, I think it was two statements that she made have made me a little bit concerned, and that's mainly the two statements that people are going based on. I haven't seen anywhere where she has strayed away from these specific talking points, and she's kind of stuck with these talking points. And so I wanted to play these clips for you guys. So the first one is a clip of her speaking to CNN's Anderson Cooper, and this was actually after the second round of debates that they had. So there was the debates with this is after the debates that obviously featured Tulsi, and then she gave statements afterwards. She was talking about Kamala Harris and her going at it, and then also she was addressing Kamala Harris's position on Medicare for all, and then that's where Tulsi gave her position on Medicare for all. So let me play you this clip for you guys first, and then we're going to talk about it on the other side.
In terms of healthcare, where are you on the spectrum of,
We've been hearing a lot about that.
Yes, Medicare for all,
Yeah.
or improve Obamacare.
Yeah.
Where are you?
Well, first, let me just say our objective has to and must be making sure that no person, no American who is sick in this country should go without care because they can't afford it. that's why I have been and continue to be a supporter for Medicare for All that would guarantee that healthcare, that quality healthcare for every single American in this country. I also believe, like every other developed country in the world that has universal healthcare, that there is a role for private insurance to play for those who want it.
Do you think for those who are embracing taking away private insurance from people, ultimately, is that just strategically, politically, a non-starter?
I don't know about the politics of it. I just think about it from the perspective of people, of the American people, that if all of a sudden you are taking away their choice, that's not a very American thing, in my opinion. I think our responsibility as leaders is to meet the challenge and address the problems that people are facing, that they are suffering because of big insurance and big pharma's influence over our healthcare system for so long, how they are profiting on the backs of sick people. So let's do our job, try to bring down the cost of healthcare in this country that's exorbitant, make sure people can get the quality care they need, and if they still choose that that's not what they want, they can go get the private insurance.
So that's not a very good response from Tulsi at first glance, in the first viewing of that. And that's something that people, myself included, took issue with. And we said, ooh, that's a little bit troubling. That's not, when you bring up the idea of giving people private insurance, that is not something that progressives want. And we obviously need to get rid of the private insurance markets and the private insurers so that they can't influence the existence of public healthcare, which is an insurance. It's just public healthcare. So it's just healthcare that you give to people. Now, obviously, there's different forms of it. There's public funding of public institutions. There's public funding of private institutions. Private funding of private institutions, so on and so forth. So there's just all different kinds. But generally, pretty much every industrialized country has these types of forms of Medicare, and they're referred to as single payer. Now, how you want to do it with private or public is kind of that's a deeper conversation. But when it comes to saying that Americans need to be given a choice and can't, it's not very American to take away their choices. In other words, to take away their choices to be screwed over by the insurance companies. That's not a very good argument. And somebody else said this, and I kind of agree with it, but that's kind of a John Delaney framing. John Delaney is one of the assholes that's running in the primary, and he's just going out there and he's, basically doing the bidding of the establishment and the insurance companies. Now, I'm not saying that Tulsi is. I just think that Tulsi, her issue is the framing of how she puts her opinions or statements on, this particular issue. Mentioning the whole private insurance or private market or whatever, like that's a red flag for everybody, right? And that's a problem, and that's something that she shouldn't be saying. Now, I want to play this other clip for you guys, and then I'm going to explain to you why I don't believe that is her position. But let me just play this clip for you guys, and then, I'll just explain a little bit further after that. So check it out.
Now, there's a lot of work that we have ahead of us, and we talked about a couple of them. The thing that I hear most from people is about healthcare, about how most families in this country are one healthcare emergency away from total bankruptcy and disaster. How is it possible that in this country that we spend far more as a country on healthcare, yet we have far worse outcomes? It's unacceptable. This is why I support passing Medicare for All legislation that will make sure that every single American is able to get the care that we need in this country. Private insurance, if you want to choose that route and go for a private option, that's up to you. But we've got to make sure that no one is turned away when they are sick and in need of care.
Okay, so there again, that's another red flag. And she mentions private care, giving people the freedom to get that private care if they choose to get it. Now, listen. First of all, the whole idea of having the choices. So like public option, private option, blah, all that stuff. Like, you can't listen. You can't give when you frame it in that way, because listen, this is the framing that has been used forever. So it's like, oh yeah, you have a public option, and then if you don't want the public option, you don't need to have it. So you have an option, you have choices. But at the end of the day, like I said, if you're letting those public the private insurance option to be there, then you're allowing people to be screwed over by the insurance industry and the private insurers. And we can't have that. So why would you want to give them a choice to have that? It just doesn't make any sense. But unfortunately, this framing has always existed, and it's been perpetuated, obviously, and obviously pushed by the Republican Party and any politician out there that is pro insurance, pro private insurance, pro big corporation. Essentially, anybody that is kind of is beholden to those entities. And again, I don't feel like that's what Tulsi is. So let me explain. I believe the issue with her in this regard specifically is that I believe her framing of the issue is incorrect. Obviously, it's incorrect just on its face. But I'm saying the way she's explaining it is just not good, and that's not the way you should frame. You should frame an issue that involves, again, private insurance, public insurance, all that stuff, public healthcare. So when she's putting it in a way of like, well, you have to have the choice. Well, no, you don't have to have the choice, because you shouldn't have the choice, because then you're allowing the choice you're allowing the choice to exist for the the private insurers to fuck you over, essentially. And what she needs to do, and this is something she's actually said before, I believe she said it during, it may have been the first debate or the second debate, I don't remember which one. Of course, the first or second debate, I'm afraid, or the ones with her, of course. But nobody else has said this, but unless it was Bernie too, he may have as well. But I'm just specifically discussing her. With her, she needs to frame it in the context of these so-called private insurers. She needs to refer to them as supplemental insurance. So she actually brought this up, I think, when she refused to raise her hand when they asked the moderators in the first debate. They asked all the candidates. They said, "Do all of you support getting rid of private insurance?" Because that's what Medicare for All does. It gets rid of the private insurance. And she did not raise her hand. Everybody was like, "Whoa, that's kind of weird. Why would you refuse to do that?" And what she explained afterwards, or even during the debate, she said that I support supplemental insurance. I support the opportunity for anybody who wants to get a different type of insurance. I'm sorry, a different type of care. So let's just say chiropractic care. Let's say plastic surgery. These kind of things. And this is something that she had laid out, and I don't believe Bernie Sanders made that case because Bernie Sanders has also said that he supports supplemental care. So my point is that when Tulsi puts it in the framing of private insurance, she's not doing it correctly. Now I don't know who's advising her specifically on this. I don't know who her health policy advisor is and all that stuff. But anything that she is saying in the context of private insurance or having that option or having that freedom, that's not the way you're supposed to do it. You need to put it in the framing of a supplemental care. And my guess is the reason why she doesn't want to put it in, and maybe it's the wrong reason, but that's just my guess. I can't come to any other conclusion. I think the reason why she's not putting it into the framing of supplemental insurance or supplemental care is because Bernie Sanders, again, has put it that way. And since he did it, he doesn't want to mimic him. She doesn't want to copy him. And that's fine. I understand that. But at the end of the day, if you're saying something that doesn't sound right, or it completely contradicts your position on something like this, especially where it's really complicated and it's really like it's really it's a complex discussion, it's a complex debate, and when it's not clear, people are going to be like, wait, what the fuck? What's going on? You either support a Medicare for All system or you don't. And she like she said in that speech, that was a speech that she gave in front of a crowd, and I don't remember where it was, but she gave a speech, and that was a campaign video released by her team, Tulsi 2020, and this is what she said. And so they put that out there. They know what she said. So it's like there's no mystery there as far as like what they want her to be saying, and the rhetoric she wants to put out there. It's just that the way they put out the rhetoric is wrong, and it's not the right way to do it. You need to frame it in the scenario, in the kind of the scenario of Medicare for all with supplemental insurance, which is exactly what Bernie Sanders supports, and he has stated that multiple times, because he does want people to have the choice to get insurance that is not covered by Medicare for all, such as, like I said, chiropractic work and plastic surgery. That may not be as important to some people, but it exists. People do that. No matter what you want to do, you should have the choice to get those kind of things done if you want to. And if people want to pay extra for that, I totally understand doing that. And it's probably not a very big market among, majority of Americans. I mean, majority of Americans, I don't know if they're getting chiropractic care. I've done it. Plastic surgery, I've never done that. I don't know. I can't really speak on that. Now, chiropractic work I did a long time ago. It's not something I've done recently, but it is something I have done. But I'm just speaking for myself, and it seems like, that kind of stuff seems like, well, apparently chiropractic work has been criticized for not, basically being voodoo, or not so much voodoo, just being like fake. It's just like not really, it's not backed up by science essentially. But whatever, people, if they want to get that, that's fine. And I could understand if, a Medicare for all system, doctors, they don't want to cover that, right? I get that, and I understand that. So why not allow that to be covered under what Tulsi refers to as a private plan, when it should just be supplemental? And again, Bernie has said this, Tulsi is saying this, but Tulsi is saying it in the wrong way. She needs to frame it much, much better, and somebody needs to tell her that, because it's completely off base, and it's making her look like she's a supporter of a public option instead of like a private, like instead of just a full-on Medicare. You know what I'm saying? It's really complicated. You can't get a grasp of what exactly she's saying. It's really strange. So anyway, this is something that Kyle Kulinski of Secular Talk addressed, and he was doing one of his talking smack hours. This is something he does, I think it's on a weekly or sometimes every other week basis. And he just kind of goes on his, in front of his camera and stuff. And he just answers questions from fans of the show and people that are watching. And so he addressed this situation in this video. And then I want you guys to take a look at this. This is something that Nico House actually posted. And then he kind of promoted this as like, oh, look, this is the right explanation as to why Tulsi Gabbard is doing what she's doing. So check this video out, and then we'll talk about it on the other side.
Don Lemon pushes her on it and says, like, yeah, but you're for eliminating private insurance. And the original question was like 70% of Americans like their private insurance or something along those lines. And, the response to that, she gave you the right response to that, and this originally came from Bernie. The response is, well, no, that's a little misleading. It's over 70% of Americans want to keep their doctor. And under Medicare for All, you can keep your doctor. So she gave that answer, which is the correct answer, but she admittedly stole it from Bernie. But then here's the part where I went, holy shit, she gets it. She goes, Lemon pushes her, oh, so you want to eliminate all private health insurance? Like, that basically seems kind of radical. And she goes, no, I'm for supplemental private health insurance. And he goes, well, under the bill you're supporting, in 4 years or so, experts say it eliminates private health insurance. And she responds, well, yeah, it's the primary source of insurance, but you could always get supplemental insurance. I don't ban supplemental insurance. That's the correct answer, because it allows for this idea of freedom still existing, so you can do what you want, but it also covers the bases because you're saying the default system is going to be the correct system, which is a single-payer system, which is a Medicare for all system, which every other developed country has.
See, so that's a great explanation by Kyle. He framed that perfectly. This is exactly the framing that the Tulsi Gabbard campaign and Tulsi Gabbard herself should be using when responding to this question. Instead of talking about private insurance, private option, or private care, whatever you want to refer to it, private. Just the term private is, it kind of freaks people out when it comes to the people, especially specifically people on the left, I mean. And when she puts it like that, it doesn't sound right. And of course it makes people kind of, wonder what she's talking about. If you put it in the frame of supplemental private or private supplement, whatever you want to, whatever kind of derivative of those words you want to put in, put them together. That's what they're referring to. Whether it's, whatever it is, it's supplemental care though, and I don't know if there's a public supplemental care, but whatever. I mean, it's supplemental care regardless, and. In the idea of supplemental care being private, it makes sense because it's a separate type of care, and these are for things that maybe public, a public system doesn't want to cover, such as like I said, plastic surgery and chiropractic work, and I don't know what else there is out there, acupuncture. I don't know, who knows? I'm not really familiar with that kind of stuff. Like I said, I've done chiropractic stuff. I've received chiropractic treatment, but that's not something I have done a lot. But I am familiar with it, and all the other ones out there I'm not very familiar with. So, but either way, it would be understandable for people who would want to receive that kind of care, and then they should be able to be covered for that under a private type of system. And it makes sense. And again, Kyle addressed it that way. And this, like I said, this is something that Nico House promoted. I don't know if Mike from Humanist Report has seen that clip, but it's very important to put this conversation into context and understand that this is about getting a Medicare for all system, but understanding that the candidates maybe a lot of times are not able to articulate their point of views as well as you would want them to. And a lot of times they don't do that, and it's unfortunate, but it is what it is. And I think it's smart to look into it, with a little bit more objectivity. No offense to Nico or Mike for not being, for not that they're not objective, but I'm saying I'm not saying they're not being objective. I'm just saying from my point of view, I'm trying to look at it in a more objective sense, and not being oh, I'm team Tulsi, or I'm team whatever, not Tulsi, or I can't stand Tulsi, or she's wrong about this, because Mike has said that he isn't anti-Tulsi, but then Nico has questioned him for that and said, no, you just you're hating on Tulsi, and you're saying all these things, and it's not right. And you initially you say I like Tulsi and I support Tulsi, but then but I don't think that's the case. I don't think Mike is anti-Tulsi, and objectively looking at it, I believe that Mike is raising some interesting questions. I just don't think he's putting it in the right way when he's saying that she supports private care. I don't think she supports private care. I think she supports it for just those specific things, like I mentioned, the supplemental care. You need to put it that way. Like when you're, criticizing Tulsi Gabbard, look at it in that way, because obviously we've all seen the debates, we've all seen all these statements that they've made, and she made clear that it was the supplemental kind of care angle that she went after, that she, kind of laid in, kind of put into the ground. She put her foot down and said, that's what I support. She supports the supplemental care system, private supplemental care. And that's what she wants for those reasons, as I explained. And that's a perfectly understandable explanation back then, but then all of a sudden her talking points have changed, and for some reason she's decided to use the term private option. So it doesn't make a lot of sense. And it seems like a lot of these people are they're just they're talking past each other, specifically when it comes to Mike and Nico and stuff. And I've seen their conversations. I've stayed out of it mostly. For the most part, I've stayed out of it. I've had conversations with people. One of the people is, her name is Sophia. She was actually on Nico House's show, one of his episodes, and they were discussing this matter. And Nico was putting out this, statement and kind of explaining, why he's going after Mike and his kind of beef with Mike, or whatever you want to call it. And they were, he was explaining to everybody, to his viewers and stuff, what argument he's trying to make. Again, I don't know if Mike from Humanist Report went after him in his video. I'm going to have to check that out. And then I can put both those videos for you guys in the description box below. You can check that out and make up your own mind on that. But I just think, largely what them two are doing, and a lot of the people that are commenting on this situation they're just talking past each other. They're just talking, yelling at each other and not actually having a conversation, it seems like. And Mike said he muted a bunch of people and then, maybe even blocked, but he muted a bunch of people, didn't want to have anything to do with them. And just listen. Go look into the different debates. I covered the debate, the first debate when she said she supported supplemental care. I know Bernie supports supplemental care. Kyle has made the same argument. Kyle, like you guys just saw, he made the argument in this video of his. And I mean, unless something is out of context there, that argument from that point from Kyle where he clarifies Tulsi's stance is pretty clear to me. And if somebody wants to, address that and say it's wrong or something, please come out with some sort of statement, because I'm not seeing anything wrong with what he's saying there, and I completely agree with it. And he's Kyle's being a very good mutual arbiter in that regard, and kind of if he has gotten involved, I don't think he has, but I'm saying like as far as kind of defending Tulsi and saying, okay, this is what she supports, I support that, and that's kind of something I'm trying to do in this debate. I'm sorry, in this video as well, because I don't want this debate to just not. It's becoming a shit show, and it's a bunch of people just yelling at each other and not really understanding what the other person is saying, while trying to honestly make statements that are incorrect about this specific candidate in this regard, being Tulsi Gabbard. So hopefully we can actually have a conversation, have a discussion, and understand what that other person is saying, instead of just ignoring it and giving our own interpretation, which is probably not going to be correct, because we all look at things through the lens of our own bias, and we need to stop doing that. So some of you may be familiar with the Bernie Sanders attacks. Actually, a lot of you are probably familiar with them, with the attacks that are coming from the mainstream media. And one of these arguments that are used against Bernie Sanders is that he is supposedly pro-NRA, the National Rifle Association. And recently, you guys obviously heard that there was 3 separate shootings, mass shootings. I think they all pretty much constitute as mass shootings that occurred. One was in Gilroy, California, which is near San Jose in the Bay Area. Another one was in Dayton, Ohio. And the other one was in El Paso, Texas. And these all had multiple deaths. I think the lowest was like 8 or 9. The highest was 20, I believe. I think the El Paso one was 20. And those all apparently constitute as mass shootings. And so, obviously the debate regarding guns, regarding mass shootings has come up. People are going at it, and they're understandably angry and upset, and they're, trying to find ways to fix the issue. But specifically when it comes to Bernie Sanders, people like to go after him and like nitpick things and like bring it up and say, well, like, this is the position you had at one point, do you believe this now? And, is this something is this something you're going to explain? And are you going to clarify your statement? So all that bullshit. So I wanted to read this piece from the Washington Post, which is historically and infamously gone after Bernie Sanders and criticized him and smeared him multiple times. And they address kind of like Bernie's past in how he supposedly was elected by the NRA. And I just wanted to read you this piece, and it's going to give you obviously a much better idea of how, for those of you who may not know, it gives you a better idea of how they like to smear him. So this is an opinion piece, and the title is "The NRA Helped Elect Bernie Sanders. Why Won't He Admit It?" And this was actually a post that was made, an article, I'm sorry, that was written for a Vermont newspaper. It's a like a weekly newspaper. It's called 7 Days. But the Washington Post they decided to post it on their thing, on their publication. So let's check out the body of the article here. It says, after a pair of mass shootings last weekend in Texas and Ohio, Senator Bernie Sanders announced his support for a gun buyback program, declaring, "The American people are sick and tired of the NRA determining gun policy in America." Considered it the zeal of a convert. For most of his political career, Sanders has been skeptical of federal gun control. "Everything being equal, states should make those decisions," he told me in March 2013, after the massacre at Sandy Hook Elementary School. "There's nothing wrong with changing your mind, particularly when the underlying facts change, but Sanders and his allies have been oddly reluctant to acknowledge a shift. Perhaps that's because doing so would undermine the central argument of his 2020 presidential campaign, that he's been right all along and everybody else is just catching up. Sanders wants credit for fighting economic inequality before it was cool, popularizing Medicare for all, and opposing the Iraq War from the start. But he refuses to take responsibility for Congress's and his own inaction on gun control. At the Democratic debates last week in Detroit and 2 months ago in Miami, Sanders claimed he lost a 1988 race for Congress because he ran on a platform of banning assault rifles. It's true that Sanders told Vermont gun groups in 1988 that he backed a ban on semi-automatic rifles and that the NRA endorsed the Republican who beat him, Peter Smith, but there's little evidence to suggest that Sanders campaigned on the issue or that it played much of a role in his loss. In fact, he told the Burlington Free Press that year that gun laws are a local control issue and should not be changed. And while Sanders is quick to bring up his 1988 defeat, he rarely mentions his 1990 win, which came with help from the NRA. Soon after Smith took office, the freshman Republican reversed himself and sponsored a bill banning assault weapons. Vermont gun groups were apoplectic, sorry, tough word there, and called for his resignation. Throughout the 1990s campaign, Sanders deftly exploited the rift. Though he, too, supported an assault weapons ban, he promised hunters he would always be straight with them. That fall, the NRA spent between $18,000 and $20,000 on anti-Smith ads. Bernie Sanders is a more honorable choice for Vermont sportsmen than Peter Smith, NRA executive Wayne LaPierre wrote his members. Sanders won the race and kept his promise. He was an occasional ally to the NRA, repeatedly voting against the Brady Bill, which mandated waiting periods and background checks, opposing funding for gun violence research, and voting to protect manufacturers and retailers from lawsuits. So I just wanted to comment quickly before we move on here, before I read the rest of the article here. But when it comes to repeatedly voting against the Brady Bill, it points out. So people just say, "Oh, he was against the Brady Bill. He was against the Brady Bill." But when they, luckily this writer, he got into the details of why he supported the Brady Bill, and he said it's mandated waiting periods and background checks. Now, from what I understand, regarding Bernie Sanders' position on why he opposed the Brady Bill is because he believed that the waiting periods for people who want to purchase a gun was too long. And I believe the Brady Bill, I would think, was pushing for 5 days. He was pushing for 3 days or something. So he was against the bill. And, this is something people constantly bring up, but that's the context of it. And Bernie has never been against background checks, but he could, I think his main issue with it was the waiting period being too long. It could have been even longer, because 3 and 5 days didn't sound like too much. But I don't know. I'm not an expert on guns, but maybe that's the issue he took. But however, the point is that that's the reason he took issues with that. And you got to remember, he is from the state of Vermont. The state of Vermont has almost, honestly, the lowest, I would say, some of the probably top 5 lowest number of gun deaths per capita in all of the United States. So just in the state of Vermont among all the other 50-something states, 52 states we have, 50 states we have. He is against. I'm sorry. He's the gun death rates in that state of Vermont is the lowest, and it's one of the lowest for sure. And this is something that obviously Bernie, he sees that, he knows that, and he's put this out as his argument as to why he has supported the the rights of gun owners and allowing people to purchase guns and not being fully anti-NRA, because at one point the NRA was decent until they started getting into bed with the gun manufacturers, and that's the biggest issue, and that's something Bernie has always spoken out against, and that's something he's spoken out multiple times now. And by the way, when it comes to the ads that were used against his opponent back in 1990 when he was running for Congress, that's something that, like, listen, it's not like they were giving him, it's not like the NRA was giving Bernie Sanders money. They say $18,000 to $20,000 were spent on ads against his opponent. It's not like they gave Bernie money and said, oh, here's some money because, we love you so much. No, they were running ads against Smith, and they were saying how great Bernie is. But that doesn't mean that Bernie Sanders was in cahoots with the NRA, And if they helped elect him, it's not like they helped elect him because he's like some, pro NRA guy that's like the Republicans are and have always been essentially, and that he's like whatever, like I said, they're in bed with the gun manufacturers, right? He's never been like that. He's criticized the gun manufacturers, and that's something that Bernie has always been clear on. Another thing that should be pointed out is that when it comes to protecting gun manufacturers and retailers from lawsuits, that's a little bit, from what I know, it's a little bit the kind of the way that argument is framed as far as like voting to protect gun manufacturers, that's actually not correct from what I know, because when you use, because they say retailers too, but I'm saying like when it comes to the idea of what gun manufacturers are, because this is something that Bernie Sanders dealt with in 2016, and it probably didn't really help him when he was facing Hillary Clinton because she was so anti-gun control. I'm sorry, so anti-gun, so she was very pro-gun control. And Bernie, he explained that the reason that he voted to protect these so-called gun manufacturers, when in reality it was referring to the mom and pop stores, the mom and pop shops that sell guns. He said that it wasn't right, because what he was against, he says it wasn't right that the gun stores that sell guns legally with background checks, with that waiting period, all that stuff, and then so those gun shops that get sued, smaller gun stores too, not like huge big gun stores, you're not going to like some big ass store that's run by a rich asshole, not like that. It's small, mom and pop gun shops that sell these guns, and they give it to somebody that passes a background check, goes through the waiting period, and then commits a mass shooting. He didn't feel it was right for those people to be sued, because they're doing their job by legally selling a gun to somebody. So that's like using the logic of, somebody goes and buys a Toyota from a Toyota dealership and then goes and runs over a bunch of people with that Toyota, does a hit and run or runs over a crowd of people. So what are you going to do? You're going to blame Toyota? Even though it was the driver that was using that car, he could have used any car. He could have used a Honda or a Toyota or any other kind of car. And it doesn't really matter what the car was. In this regard, it doesn't really matter what it doesn't matter if the person ended up buying it from this store or that store or whatever. The person committed the crime after legally purchasing the firearm. So if you're attacking, if you have an issue with the obviously the kind of the selling of the gun in general, that's a different issue. That's a different conversation. That's a different issue. You can have that conversation separately. That could just be between people that are just anti-gun in general, regardless of where you get it from. But when it comes to purchasing guns from a specific dealer, and they do their job and they follow the rules, it's understandable to protect those people that are selling those guns illegally. So if you're mad at that, then you're just mad at the wrong person. You're mad at the wrong people. You're mad at the wrong, you're taking issue with something that shouldn't be taken issue with, in my opinion. But that's the reason why Bernie Sanders was against, he was against kind of the bills that, the legislation that was going to sue the gun manufacturers, retailers. But you have to understand, when they say gun manufacturers, it's not talking about the same corrupt gun the corrupt, kind of greedy gun manufacturers that are in bed with the NRA today. Bernie is against them, but he's just referring to the gun manufacturers in the sense of the people that sell the guns, the retailers. And it seems like the attacks that have been used on him have used that term, retailers and gun manufacturers, like they do in this article, have used it in conjunction as if they're referring to actual gun manufacturers who are corrupt. But no, they're talking about the people that sell guns in a little store, and they go through the whole same process and do all the right legalities and all that stuff. So if you're mad at those people, honestly, you're delusional, and you're going after the wrong people, in my opinion, and in the opinion of Bernie Sanders as well. Continuing on with the article here, it says he also honored his commitment in 1994 to vote for an assault weapons ban. But as the frequency and severity of mass shootings increased over the next 2 decades, Sanders continued to maintain that the federal government ought to avoid regulating firearms. Quoting him, it says, "In my view, decisions about gun control should be made as close to home as possible at the state level." He said after a July 2012 shooting at a movie theater in Aurora, Colorado. Now, I don't know. I mean, I think states' rights, again, when it comes to something like a state like Vermont, again, like I said before, Vermont has very, very low gun crimes. People, when they make the issue, when they state that the issue should be like states' rights and should be like a states' right issue, and just like that specific state should deal with it, I think that's a perfectly fine argument when it comes to the selling of just like non-automatic or semi-automatic rifles. And when it comes just to regular handguns and just, nothing that's like, that's like kind of like a mass murder type weapon, I think it's important that those mass murder type weapons should, even Bernie has voted. He's voted on an assault weapons ban. They refer to them as assault weapons ban 3 times, and because he doesn't like the existence of assault weapons, and assault weapons are the ones that are used in these mass shootings. Now, if you're referring to handguns and stuff like that, that's a little bit different because those aren't able to be used in mass shootings as much because they don't kill in masses as much as a assault rifle would do. And it's understandable to look at that in states' rights, but I believe that states' rights should be addressing just handguns in general. Assault weapons shouldn't even be able to be purchased by regular people. I just don't think that's right, because those are the ones that are involved in these mass shootings. But handguns, people have handguns. Sometimes they want to have them for protection. And when it comes to certain states, like Montana and, South Dakota and Vermont and, I don't know, just throughout any kind of like rural type area, those kind of areas have guns, and they don't have them for shooting, mass shootings. Trust me, those are not the places that have mass shootings majority of the time. And I think the debate should be, I think the idea of like a states' rights issue should be considered, and I don't think that's a problem, because at the end of the day, you can't just put a ban on all weapons in every single state all over the country and expect people to be okay with that, because it's not one of those issues where every single state is the same. They're not. They're different, So I agree with that when Bernie says that. Now, if he's still making that statement, I don't know. But I agree with that, and I feel like he's only not making that statement because he knows that the Democratic base, obviously, and a lot of progressives are against that. They don't agree with him on that. But I agree with him on that. So that's just my take. Continuing on here, it says, in my interview with Sanders after the Sandy Hook shooting, he said it was more important to address mental health than the availability of firearms, adding, "This is not one of my major issues." Yeah, that's not a very good way to put it. However, I do believe that mental health matters are important when it comes to these kind of mass shootings. I think that's part of it. I don't think it's the only thing. And, Bernie Sanders made a statement. He made a statement where he said that this is a mental health issue, but he also made it in conjunction with a bunch of other things that he said. It's not just mental health issues. And I agree with him. I don't think it's just a mental health issue, but it is something that needs to be addressed. You need to address multiple, multiple matters that go into, multiple factors that go into why something happens. It's not just one thing or the other, So I think he's perfectly fine in saying it is a mental health issue, but you can't say it's not one of your major issues. And then, he apparently said that in 2012 after Sandy Hook. You can't say that then and then change your mind, 8 years later and say that's something, say it's all of a sudden it's so important. No, you have to address these issues equally, and sometimes even more important than the other things. And by the way, Bernie Sanders the reason why Bernie Sanders mentions the whole mental health issues is because Medicare for All is a big issue for him, and he feels that mental health treatment should be covered by Medicare for All. So he ties it in with Medicare for All, and I think that's very smart, because mental health is definitely an issue. When it comes to PTSD, that's an issue. When it comes to CTE, so like people that for example, the people that are football players and sometimes even soccer players, people that have suffered big time head trauma. He wants all those things to be addressed, by by a Medicare for All system, and I think that's very, very good. I totally agree with him on that, and that's something that he should definitely push, because that's an issue right now for many Americans. It says here, Sanders has since embraced federal gun control, and during his heated race against Hillary Clinton in 2016, he disavowed his previous positions on gun violence research and manufacture of liability. While the senator from Vermont isn't the only rural Democrat who's done an about-face on the issue, others have been more forthcoming about it. Montana Governor Steve Bullock was an avowed gun control opponent until last summer, when he declared his support for universal background checks and an assault weapons ban. During last week's debate, he noted that he had been personally impacted by gun violence when his 11-year-old nephew was shot to death on a playground in 1994. That's sad, huh? Yes, it seems like many times when these issues they affect that person specifically, that politician specifically, whatever it's gun matters or whatever, it seems like they definitely they gain much more of a perspective on addressing it better. Excuse me. So it says Senator Kirsten Gillibrand, Democrat of New York, had an A rating from the NRA when she represented an upstate New York congressional district not far from Sanders's. Soon after she was appointed to the Senate in 2009 and inherited a far more urban constituency, she embraced gun control and earned an F rating from the NRA. I didn't do the right thing, she told CNN this March, explaining that earlier in her career, she had not cared enough about gun violence outside her district. Quoting Gillibrand here, it says, "I think that makes me a better candidate for president. I think it makes me a better person, because if you don't have an ounce of humility to know when you're wrong, how are you possibly going to govern all of America?" That's a question Sanders might ask himself. So that's not... Bernie Sanders has not been the biggest advocate. If not, he's probably one of the least biggest advocates. He's not a big advocate for them at all, has never really been. Again, they want to frame it that way because, he got help that one time that he ran, and he just happened to win that race. And that wasn't even a time that they were he didn't even embrace their support. Back when in 1990, when he was running against Peter Smith guy that had won his seat, and then Bernie won it after him, and I guess they had faced each other multiple times in a row, as far as every 2 years for Congress, But to claim that the NRA helped him win is just absurd. Just because they didn't like the other guy and they said some nice things about Bernie Sanders doesn't mean they helped him. Bernie Sanders is not specifically, his issues are not specifically, have never really been, as far as I know, have specifically, catered to gun rights. But when it comes to Vermont, again, Vermont is the state with one of the lowest gun death rates in the country, and if you are a representative of a constituency, you have to represent your district, or in the case of Senate, your state, and You have to do what the people of that state want. You can't go into a state. He's not originally from Vermont. He's originally from Brooklyn, New York. Now, if he was in Brooklyn, let's say if he was a senator from New York, I guarantee you he would have said, yeah, I support a, heavier, more stricter gun control. I support laws that would, not allow people to get, assault weapons, blah, 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 all that stuff. So all the same positions that people in New York take, he would take the same exact thing. It depends on where you're from. And this is in my opinion, this is the most objective way to, to look at this matter. I'm not a Bernie sycophant where I'm just defending everything he does. I don't agree with some of his, some of the ways that he framed, his statements when it comes to, not caring about, this is not a serious issue for me, or it's not a main issue for me. That's not the way you have to put it. Everything is a main issue in this country. So he's had some missteps in that regard, but largely when it comes down to it, you have to represent your constituency, and you have to do what they want so that they don't vote you out, because otherwise he would just be voted out of that district because he was a congressman at the time, and I think they have an at-large district. They only have one congressional seat in Vermont, and it's totally understandable to represent that position when that's what the people in that state want. So if people are mad at him for representing his constituency, then what is he supposed to do? Then you would attack him for not winning any seats, for being an unsuccessful politician. But he's obviously been successful because he's representing his state, and he's never said he's pro NRA. He never said he loves guns. None of that shit. In fact, he has a D- rating from the NRA. So, and he's never had even close to an A+ rating, A or A+ rating. When Kirsten Gillibrand has that, see, that's the thing with Kirsten Gillibrand. She had an A rating. So why are you comparing that to Bernie Sanders? Bernie Sanders has had lifelong D- rating. So on average, his rating is not even close to an A. It's horrible. It's a horrible record. When you look at it from the mindset of like a pro-gun person, pro-NRA type person, he's got a horrible record. They would hate it, and they probably do. And I guarantee you, one of the main people that are going to be hating Bernie Sanders and pouring money into Donald Trump in this election, if Bernie Sanders is the nominee, I guarantee you one of them is going to be the NRA. Watch. They're going to hate Bernie Sanders once this primary is over and once this election is over. They're going to despise Bernie Sanders, and Donald Trump being the the bitch boy that he is, he's going to bow down to Wayne LaPierre and all those assholes from the NRA, and they're going to hate it. They're going to love him for his his fawning support for them, and I don't think it's going to work out well, because people are sick of all these mass shootings. They're sick of all these people that are dying from, for no reason, because a bunch of crazy motherfucking, assholes want to go out and kill a bunch of innocent people. And we've had enough of it, and we need somebody that's going to not only represent people, but is going to do the right thing. And I believe, and progressives like myself believe, that person is Bernie Sanders. Recently, Bernie Sanders went on the Joe Rogan Experience. Now, this is a show that is hosted by TV personality and comedian Joe Rogan. I've been watching the Joe Rogan Experience and listening to the Joe Rogan Experience for many, many years now. It's an awesome show. You guys should definitely check it out. And actually, a lot of you have already probably checked it out because of Bernie's appearance, and he did an absolutely wonderful job on this roughly one hour appearance that he made with Rogan. It was about 67 minutes long, pretty short considering Bernie's schedule, just kind of running around and doing campaign events and stuff. And they had some great discussions, great conversations about things that everything. I can literally read you a list of all the things that they discussed, and it was really incredible, all the things that they covered, because a lot of people, unfortunately, a lot of people talk shit about Joe Rogan. They pretend he's like some fucking right winger and he's like a pro-white supremacist and everything. Listen, I have been listening to Joe Rogan for so long, whether he's, you know, hosting the UFC events, or actually being a commentator for UFC events, which is the Ultimate Fighting Championship, mixed martial arts events, or, you know, hosting Fear Factor and stuff like that. He's a great guy. He's not only a funny guy, but he's a really a decent human being, in my opinion. And some issue, you know, I don't agree with him on everything, and I don't agree with the fact that he does with some of the guests that he brings on, because he brings on a lot of people that are like right wingers and stuff, and people take issue with this. But I just wanted to read you the issues here. Somebody posted on, you know, on the YouTube comments section, which I'm going to get to in a second, but on the YouTube comments section, they listed kind of all the different things that they spoke about. And here, let me just give you a kind of a rough list of everything they spoke about. They spoke about mainstream presidential debates, misconceptions of Bernie Sanders and healthcare in America, lobbyists in America, pharmaceutical policies. How do you stop these policies? What are you going to do President Bernie, if Bernie Sanders is president? Minimum wage increases, large corporations not paying taxes, paying for college education and student loans, mental health reform and gun control, implementing assault rifle ban, mental health continued. So they continue to talk about mental health, marijuana legalization in America, illegal drug usage, incarceration, and decriminalization, impoverished communities around America. How does a president do all of this? Climate change, convincing people climate change is real, and are you going to let us know about aliens when you become president? That was a pretty funny part. I'll post the article that kind of explains the whole episode and how it went and stuff. You guys want to check it out. It's from yahoo.com. But yeah, they discussed a lot of important issues, man. It was really crazy. It was really crazy because people don't, not people, just, well, first of all, people don't really, like, honestly, a lot of people, it doesn't seem like they take podcasts that seriously. You know, I mean, I host a podcast, but I mean, I'm saying like podcasts when two people are talking together. Just one person kind of sitting in front of you like this, just talking. That's pretty popular. New media is definitely a popular thing for sure. But when it comes to, you know, two people sitting at a desk and just having a conversation, that's something that it's not as popular to some people, depending on who you talk to. Now, I would say that majority of Joe Rogan's audience is, from what I've heard, is apolitical. I did not know that. They are apolitical, but they have an interest in like human events, things that are happening out there among, you know, regular people they care about. And this is something that people need to watch more, because the debates that go on, the CNN, MSNBC, whatever, NBC, whatever, Fox News debates that happen, debates is one thing, but yeah, those things that happen, they're just not informative. They involve short sound bites and sound clips that people, you barely get to hear the entire perspective of what somebody believes. This show, like Joe Rogan's show, Joe Rogan's show, that's the show where you can learn about somebody more, you can learn about somebody's views and ideology and, what kind of person they are, deep down, much, much better than you can on anything that you're going to see on CNN. And this is something that CNN and the mainstream media hates. They hate the existence of these podcasts, let alone new media like this. And, Kyle Klinsky and Jimmy Dore and Tim Black and all these, great hosts out there that we have that are, on the left and progressive. But so some of you might be skeptical out there and be like, I don't know. I don't really care for Joe Rogan. I don't really care for his show. I don't want to give him his show any kind of attention. I can't stand it. He's a white supremacist, something fucking white supremacist sympathizer, and he brings on a lot of right wingers. I can't stand it. So like people just get triggered by this, and they can't stand the fact that he dares to have a conversation with people that are deplorable. And I'm here to tell you that it's not only is it not that bad because you're just having a conversation, you're not going there and embracing and endorsing the position that these people take, because That's not what it is. I mean, if using that logic, then anybody that has any kind of conversation with somebody that's an asshole, or that's a right winger, or that's a white supremacist, or a racist, that means that person is automatically terrible. Now, if they agree with him, that's a different story. And from what I know about Joe Rogan, again, I've known about him for many, many years. What I know about him, he does not support racism. He does not support white supremacy. He does not support, these horrible views. That's just not what he does. So the people that say that are just honestly delusional in my mind, and they're just making things up, and they just can't stand that somebody dares to do these things. However, when it comes to somebody like Joe Rogan, what a lot of these people don't know is that he brings on all kinds of left-wingers on his show. But right before he brought on Bernie Sanders, he had also brought on Cornel West, who was a big Bernie Sanders supporter. And a lot of people say that Cornel West was the reason behind why Bernie Sanders came on his show, because Cornel West spoke to Rogan, and he said, "Hey, you should bring on Bernie Sanders." He was talking up Bernie Sanders a lot during their conversation. I think the conversation with Cornel West was a few days before that, and so he brought on Bernie Sanders, had that conversation, and it came out with glowing reviews. People loved this conversation. And I'm not just talking about left-wingers. Obviously, the left-wingers that support Bernie Sanders loved it. But there's even people that are like right-wingers, admittedly. People that are right-wingers that are not supporters of Bernie Sanders, they learned more about Bernie Sanders in this conversation with Joe Rogan, more than they had ever learned anything from Fox News and MSNBC and all that stuff, and CNN and all that crap. So check out some of these comments. I'm just going to read you like a bunch of the comments that stood out to me, and some of it is very, very, it's amazing. So it says here, Supbro TV says, last 2 CNN debates were seen by 2.4 million people. This shit has 6+ million views just on YouTube. Who knows how many on iTunes? And by the way, the number of viewers so far that have seen this is 7.8 million people have seen this. Almost 8 million people. And it's only been how many days now? It's only been 6 days. Or 5 days, I think. Yeah, 5 days. So, and then another comment says from Dr. Zayas, Joe Rogan used to encourage people to eat donkey balls on reality TV and is now interviewing presidential candidates more effectively than the mainstream media. That's so true. Another one says here, Kathy Lindner says, can't thank Joe Rogan enough for providing a forum beyond what MSM provides. Most people recognize the truth and reasonableness when they hear it. Thank you, Bernie Sanders. Another person says they are named Success is the Key, or is key. First time I finally understand his point of view. Thank you, Joe. It says Jack Glasper says, left or right, we can all agree that alternative long-form discussions like this are far superior to the sound bite factories in the mainstream media. Another person, Zachary Willoughby, says, I have gained respect for Bernie coming and talking like, whoa, not a yelling match. Another person says, Charles Dunlop says, it's a sense of hope. It's a sense of realism. This man has my full financial support and vote. Another person says, now you see how the crazy socialist is not that radical. It's just common sense. Go Bernie, go Bernie. Javram Arov said that. Another person, Tony Lozano, this was more informative than any of those garbage debates. The debates felt like an episode of InfoWars. Jesus fucking Christ, make podcast interviews mandatory. TV sucks. So true. Let's see. It's another person, a minor inconvenience. That's the name of the person. I registered to vote today after hearing this, just to vote for this man. Thank you so much, Bernie. You have my support. Look at this one. It says, Tony Willis, as someone who would consider themselves a conservative, I have to say I have a great deal of respect for so many of Mr. Sanders' answers and for the man himself as well. His humility is something that is pretty damn novel in today's body politic, and it's truly refreshing. Thank you. I mean, this shit goes on and on. It's amazing. So, I think you guys get the idea. There's so many fucking comments. So anyway, if you guys want to go check that out, I'll obviously post the I'll post the video of Rogan's interview with Bernie in that comment section. I'm sorry, in the discussion, the description box below. By the way, the number of comments left on this video, 146,571 comments. Wow, unbelievable. And I remember, I watched this interview. I watched it with my mom and dad on last Tuesday night, and I honestly didn't expect this many people to watch it. And this was trending #1 on YouTube. That's a big deal. And I think it was top 10 for like multiple days after that too. So that says a lot. That says a hell of a lot about how people are interested in somebody and listening to somebody. And look at that. People are going out there, they're conservative, right wing, they have views that, perhaps people obviously on the progressive side don't agree with and can't stand, but they are loving the things that Bernie Sanders is saying, because he's saying things that all regular people can agree with. And this is something that people need to hear. And furthermore, people need to stop referring to Joe Rogan in these, ridiculously close-minded ways. And this comes from a lot of liberals and a lot of, certainly liberals, because they hate Bernie anyway, but, neoliberals, but, and a lot of even progressives, unfortunately. I've seen a lot of people, I've argued with a lot of people about how, when they refer to Joe Rogan as a sympathizer with, white supremacists, because he brings on like Alex Jones and, a bunch of other, Ben Shapiro he's brought on. Who else? Gavin McInnes was another guy. He's a Fox News, not a personality or something. Yeah, just a bunch of dudes, though. Milo Yiannopoulos he brought on. That one New York Times columnist, what's her name? Candace Owens he's also brought on. He brought on this girl, what's her name? She's a big Israel supporter too. Anyway, yeah, she was also a right winger. So yeah, just right winger after right winger. But he's also brought on Jimmy Dore twice. He's brought on Kyle Kulinski twice. He's brought on Cenk Uygur. He's brought on Anna Kasparian twice, both from TYT, of course. He's brought on Abby Martin multiple times. Abby Martin has gone on there. He's brought on what's his name? Lee Camp. He's a host for RT. He's a comedian. He's a great guy. He's brought him on. Man, he's brought everybody on his show, and people just want to obsess over the right wingers that he has. It's crazy, like as if like nobody cares. Nobody cares about the left wingers he's brought, or you just don't know, and you just focus on, just focus on those right wingers, because they've gone to the point, like as I said, they were referred to him as like some sort of white supremacist sympathizer. They referred to him as also somebody that is a gateway, quote unquote, gateway to the right, to the alt-right, gateway to the alt-right. That is crazy. The things some of these people say is just absurd, and they just have zero regard for like caring about actual conversation, discussion. If you don't want to watch, Joe Rogan talk to Ben Shapiro or Gavin McInnes or Alex Jones, that's perfectly fine. I'm not saying that you should go watch those shows, but don't determine somebody's reputation and, smear them because they have conversations with those people, and don't, spit in their eye and tell them they're wrong. By the way, when he had Candace Owens on, he called her out for her denial of climate change. He went after Milo Yiannopoulos, I believe, for what was it? He went after her. He went after Milo for denying that being gay is a like a regular, like it's a thing that is in your body. He assumes that like, oh no, you just choose to be gay, so you're not biologically gay, according to Milo Yiannopoulos. But Joe Rogan slapped him around for that. And Milo was yelling at him and interrupting Rogan and telling him, speaking over him and stuff. And Rogan was like, dude, relax. Let's have a conversation. Stop interrupting me so much. We can't have a conversation if you're going to keep yelling over me. So stop all this crosstalk. And he tried to have a conversation with Milo and try and convince him that this is a ridiculous position to take. And Milo Yiannopoulos is gay. And he's actually going out there and saying that, like, oh, no, being gay, like, if I had an option, I wouldn't be gay. Dude, you're gay. It doesn't matter whether you have an option or not. You're gay. If you're gay, you're gay. If you like dick, that's fine. If you like, if you're a man and you like dick, that's fine. If you're a woman and you like, vagina, that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. You're a normal person. That doesn't make you a bad person. Doesn't make you abnormal at all. And this is an argument coming from a straight man telling it to a gay man who's, self-hating himself, essentially. So people that want to go out there and pretend like Rogan is a right-winger, a secret right-winger or some shit because he's best friends with Alex Jones or whatever, and, he dares to talk to people like that, honestly, you're just a close-minded prick. And that goes for progressives, that goes for liberals, neoliberals, Democrat loyalists, whatever. If you think like that, I don't want to have anything to do with you because those people are assholes. And his conversation with Cornel West and Bernie Sanders and all those other left-wingers that I mentioned proves you people wrong. So you don't know anything. You don't know shit about Joe Rogan. I'm somebody that has been watching and listening to Joe Rogan forever. And I know exactly what he stands for. And he's never taken a position that is a right wing. In fact, one time I think he even said that Barack Obama is his favorite president of all time. This was back when he was president still, obviously. And I was like, a lot of people were like, oh my God, Joe Rogan, how dare you say that? How could you take that position? But he said it. And so what are you going to say now? So all of a sudden, what? I mean, and believe me, I don't support Barack Obama. I voted for him, but I don't support his policies. But those are the things that right-wingers hate for for anybody to say, especially a left-winger. So, and, if the right-wingers hate it, then are hating what Joe Rogan is saying, then why would they be loving him so much? How would he be a right-winger if he supports somebody that the right-wingers hate? So, I mean, trying to understand the logic of some of these people just doesn't make any sense. So, I don't even know why I bother with it, but it pisses me off. Not too long ago, Joe Biden, he actually hired a foreign policy advisor. So he has a foreign policy advisor now who actually worked for George W. Bush. And this is something that the Intercept, great publication, they reported on this in July 24th, 2019. So roughly about 3 weeks ago or so. But there was an article recently posted by Gritpost. Gritpost is apparently actually a very good publication. It's it's a publication that I get kind of recently just stumbled upon, and they talk about apparently like working class issues, and they're not like owned by a big corporation or anything, so they do really good work. They actually refer to themselves as real news for the working class. So they discussed this issue in a article here, pretty short article here, but I wanted to read this out for you guys, and so you can get a better idea of who this fucking this former Bush flunky guy is. So the title of the article is Biden's newest advisor is a George W. Bush appointee who supported the Iraq War. Nicholas Burns, who joined the Biden campaign as a foreign policy advisor this week, was an avid supporter of the Iraq War during his time in the George W. Bush administration. CNN reported Monday that Burns, who was the Undersecretary of Political Affairs at the U.S. State Department during Bush 43's administration, George W. Bush, which is obviously the son of George H.W. Bush, had joined Biden's 2020 campaign for the presidency to drive the former vice president's foreign policy agenda. Burns also served on the National Security Council in both Bill Clinton and George H.W. Bush, I don't know what's H. Bush, George H.W. Bush administrations, and is a professor at Harvard University's Kennedy School of Government, according to his LinkedIn profile. According to The Intercept, Burns is a senior counselor at the Cohen Group, which the outlet describes as a global lobbying and influence firm that represents weapons makers and other companies with interests in the U.S. and overseas. However, what may be perhaps the biggest foreign policy notch on Burns' belt is his support for George W. Bush's war in Iraq that is viewed as the biggest contributor to the destabilization of the Middle East. The Iraq War was a war of choice. I supported the war in my mind. We decapitated the government. We ran everything. Burns said in 2015, though he acknowledged that the war was a pretty serious blunder. Is he bragging about decapitating it? It's so weird. Anyway, it says Biden has since apologized for once supporting the Iraq War when he served as chairman of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee prior to becoming vice president. However, his hiring of Burns as a foreign policy advisor suggests that he hasn't yet learned any meaningful lesson for supporting the ill-fated war that led to approximately 500,000 Iraqi deaths and the deaths of more than 4,400 U.S. troops. It could also be speculated that Biden's hiring of Burns to help shape his foreign policy is a signal to the military-industrial complex that he would accommodate their views in his administration. Should he win the 2020 election. In his memoir, former Secretary of Defense Robert Gates wrote of Biden that while he was a man of integrity, incapable of hiding what he really thinks, and one of those rare people who you could turn to for help in a personal crisis, the former vice president was also wrong on nearly every major foreign policy and national security issue over the past 4 decades. Damn. If that's something that's coming from Robert Gates, who worked for George W. Bush, by the way, that's a pretty big statement. It says on Thursday, a Monmouth University poll of Iowa voters found that Biden was still the top choice of likely Iowa Democratic primary voters following the second round of Democratic presidential debates, despite Biden's lackluster performance. By the way, his performance in the first debate was even worse. Did a little bit better in the second one. But yeah, that's like I don't know if they said that in the article, but yeah, I mean, yeah, this is a clear sign of Joe Biden still not understanding the error of his ways. He's still clueless. He's still an idiot, and he can't figure out, like, if you ask him something like this, you tell him, like, listen, bro, it's not a good idea for you to be, hiring this guy. If somebody asked him, why are you hiring this guy? He's going to be like, oh, what's the big deal? He said that his support for, the Iraq War was he supported the Iraq War, but it was, he admits that it's a serious blunder. Okay. Well, thanks for letting us know now. What is it? He's apparently said that in 2015. This guy did, this Nicholas Burns. So, I mean, that's a little bit late to be admitting fault. And even Biden himself admits fault and thinks everybody has forgiven him. Obviously, because he's, obviously somebody like Joe Biden, he operates within the establishment. So when he admits he's wrong, he thinks that people are forgiving him because he's within that bubble. But if you talk to regular people, they do not forgive him. I do not forgive him for his support of the war, because he supported every other war too. So it's not like he's, oh wow, just made a mistake. I shouldn't have supported that one war that killed 500,000 people, possibly even 1 million people, and was after the biggest attack on American soil, which was 9/11. So we went into Iraq for completely wrong reasons. Oh yeah, we totally forgive you for that. No, that's not how it works. You're not going to get off that easy, bro. So yeah, so the people that that don't have an issue with this, I don't know who they are, honestly. I don't want to know those people, but honestly, it's probably a lot of Democrats who think like that. But it's so, I mean, if they do, that's sad. And it's sad that anybody would forgive this guy for for this and then be like, oh, well, he's so much better than Trump. Trump is he's bad, obviously. Trump is a fucking terrible human being. But that doesn't, I mean, is our bar that low? That doesn't mean that, Joe Biden is not as bad because Joe Biden isn't as racist and isn't as sexist. I mean, he has racist and sexist views, Biden does. But just because he's a little less worse than Trump in that regard doesn't mean he's the guy that should be president. And Joe Biden, regardless of all this stuff, somehow he's managed to stay at the top of the polls. But, I mean, I don't see him staying there. In fact, recently he's been making a lot of gaffes. He's been making a lot of ridiculous gaffes saying some fucking stupid things. At one point in one of his speeches that he was giving, he says that he said something along the lines of black children aren't the only ones that are uneducated, or white kids can be uneducated too, or something. And then another one, he said he was president when the Parkland shooting happened in Parkland, Florida. And then another one, he was saying, I support truth over facts, or something like that. He was giving a speech somewhere. Yeah, or like a kind of a rally kind of thing. Yeah, so he's just making all these like weird gaffes. The one about like black kids, black kids are, they're educated. They're not the, let me get the exact quote here. 1 second. Okay, here it is. It says, poor kids are just as bright as white kids. Poor kids. He didn't even say black kids. Let me clarify that. I'm sorry about that. I mean, he is referring to black kids when he says poor kids. Because then why would he say poor kids are just as bright as white kids? So there's you feel like there's as if there's no poor white kids out there? As if poor white kids can't be uneducated. He's referring to black kids when he's saying that. He's not. But that's the thing. It's just a typical gaffe from Biden. Those are the kind of things that he's been doing. He's been doing this, saying this stupid shit forever. And I mean, even as vice president, he was saying dumb shit like this. But luckily for him, as vice president, he was vice president. So he wasn't getting that much attention. He was mostly in the shadow of Barack Obama, who was obviously president. And when you're vice president, you don't get that much attention when it comes to the kind of the big things that happen. Although his gaffes still did get a lot of attention, because he, at some points he was like, was caught on hot mic saying like, oh, this is a big fucking deal. So he was saying that to Obama when, I think it was when Obamacare passed or something. Something happened. Some big legislation got passed or something. And he said, this is a big fucking deal. So like, and then he said a couple of other things I can't remember, but excuse me. So yeah, and he's a gaffe machine. He's like that, and he just continues to be like that. And it's not something that, it's not so much as being like president. It's not like being unpresidential, but it's not like, do you really want that kind of, like, considering how bad Trump is because Trump is really obviously really bad with his gaffes too. So as bad as Trump is, are Democrats, because they always mock, because Democratic loyalists, people on the left, a lot of times, they're always mocking Donald Trump for the stupid shit that he says. So are you actually going to be like, okay with Joe Biden? You're going to be okay with Joe Biden saying stupid things, but you're not going to be, you're going to bash Trump for it, but you're not going to attack Biden for it? Come on. I mean, that just makes no sense to me. And honestly, I'm surprised that Biden has the amount of support that he has, because it seems like everybody is so much into like Kamala Harris and Elizabeth Warren. I'm talking about the establishment, by the way. I'm not talking about progressives and stuff. Progressives obviously support Bernie Sanders and Tulsi Gabbard. But when it comes to the establishment, Elizabeth Warren, as semi-left, semi-progressive as she is still the part of the establishment. And I'll be getting to a story kind of about Elizabeth Warren and her establishmentism in a little bit here, but yeah, it's just these things with Joe Biden, they just don't end. And this is not the kind of guy I would want to be president, just like I wouldn't want Donald Trump to be president, because they're both embarrassing gaffe machines. They're both embarrassing, just old white dudes that just say stupid shit. I mean, fine, you can take issue with Bernie Sanders for being a white guy, old white guy, which is stupid enough as it is, because just because of the skin, color of your skin doesn't mean you're a bad person. But whatever, if you want to take issue with the fact that we've had a lot of old white guys as president and in politics, that's one thing. But Bernie Sanders has the best policies among any other politician that's currently running right now for president, let alone being the best politician in the country, the most popular. And the people that want to hate on Bernie Sanders in the same way that they hate on Trump, and even to some extent Biden, because that's what people have said. They said, well, some of the people on the Democratic side, the Democratic loyalist voters and people that are idiots on Twitter, essentially, they've said like, oh yeah, we don't need any Biden, we don't need any Bernie, we don't want any white guys, we already have Trump, so we don't need any white guys, we want Kamala Harris because she's black and female. Okay, so but then policy-wise, they don't give a shit. When it comes to policy, these people are just like, who gives a fucking rat's ass? It doesn't matter. We need to get the woman in there, or we need to get Elizabeth Warren, whether it's Elizabeth Warren or Kamala Harris or Kirsten Gillibrand or Amy Klobuchar. Ugh, give me a break. So even the people that are polling like shit, like Klobuchar and Kirsten Gillibrand and stuff, like, it's embarrassing to think that those people should even remotely be taken seriously. So that's just a whole another insane conversation to have that people want to have. But that's the thing. It's really no different than Biden. The only difference with Biden is that he's old and white, and he's got the same fucking policies. Well, probably a little bit worse than like the likes of Klobuchar and Warren and Kamala Harris too. So it's these establishment politicians just continue to get a break, and it's even got to the point that the media isn't even they don't even care really about the things that Biden is saying regarding his gaffes, aside from his policies too. His policies, they don't fucking give a shit. But when it comes to his gaffes, they're almost kind of they act like it's not even happening. They're just like, oh, whatever, big deal. Oh, he's still ahead in the polls, he must be doing really good, but and I think honestly the reason for that is because Trump is so bad. And I'm talking about MSNBC, CNN, mainly MSNBC, because I even covered early in one of my first podcasts, The Progressive Square. I talked about how MSNBC was basically shilling for Joe Biden. They loved the idea of Joe Biden at the time, and this was 3 months ago. So back then, they loved him. They loved the idea of Joe Biden running for president and being one of the candidates. Oh yeah, we totally back him because he's establishment neoliberal centrist, former VP to Obama. So he must be awesome, right? That's what they thought, and they're still defending him to this point. There was a segment that Chris Matthews, host on MSNBC, did where he said, "Oh, this is down to a 2-person race."
A new Franklin and Marshall poll has studied Pennsylvania Democrats and tells us a lot about the coming 2020 presidential election. I've noticed some interesting dividing lines between the two I see right now as the eventual frontrunners. Joe Biden is ahead now, winning big among moderates, leading among women, older voters, and those who didn't finish college. Biden also leads among those making less than $35,000 a year and among African Americans, Catholics, and evangelicals. Elizabeth Warren wins among liberals, among voters of college graduates, and those making more than $75,000 a year. The competition between these two frontrunners is getting serious. Biden holds a lead, but still needs to grow it. Warren's climb to number 2 position has been relentless. So here's where the race appears to be heading by the time of the first big test. That would be the Iowa caucuses in early February. If Biden's number starts to grow, look out. He's unlikely to be caught. But that's the big if. If not, the Massachusetts Senate will, continuing at our current rate, catch the former vice president by the critical early days of Iowa. And this is how it's headed in the race to take on President Trump. It's a 2-person race, and it's going to be close. The question I have to suppose is which of these two candidates, Biden or Warren, or still possibly some other candidate, can do the essential job most Americans most want accomplished, not just winning in Iowa and later in Pennsylvania, but removing Donald Trump from his current address at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. And that's hardball for now.
It's between Elizabeth Warren and Joe Biden. I'm surprised they didn't come out in there, but Elizabeth Warren and Joe Biden. It's a 2-person race. These two are going at it, blah, blah, blah. Completely disregarding Bernie Sanders and, surprisingly enough, disregarding Kamala Harris, because I know MSNBC and a lot of their hosts and contributors and guests and stuff, they love Kamala Harris. And but they want to put forth the idea that like, oh well, because Biden is so quote unquote electable, because he's such a whatever, he's such he's ahead in the polls and stuff like that, he must be the choice. That's the thing. That's when they don't give a shit about the policies. Because if they actually cared about the policies, they would say, okay, whatever. Let's say, just put out an idea, like, put out a kind of a mentality of like, okay, we like Kamala's policies a little bit better than Joe Biden's. For example, Joe Biden being, against busing and during the days of segregation and everything, and Kamala Harris calling him out for that. They couldn't even say that. They're still saying, oh no, Biden is the guy. And I think it's part of the idea that somebody like Chris Matthews is shilling for Joe Biden so much is because he is also from Pennsylvania. Joe Biden is from Pennsylvania. I believe Joe Biden is from Scranton, Pennsylvania, but Chris Matthews is from Philadelphia. I believe Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. So yeah, but they're from the same kind of region. They're from the same state, and it's not very surprising that Matthews would be shilling for him like that. But at the same time, pretending as if this is a two-person race is just crazy. That's ridiculous. So fucking illogical and, going against reality and the facts. And I guess you can't really be surprised by that, right? That's what MSNBC does. MSNBC is in the business of pushing for the politicians that, carry water for the establishment, disregard the Democratic establishment. But this kind of the sad and pathetic thing is that MSNBC doesn't care about stories like this when he's hiring, former Bush flunkies that supported the Iraq War to be his new foreign policy advisor. I mean, that's a huge red flag for anybody that has even half a brain. Even the people that watch MSNBC should take issue with that, but they don't, apparently. Apparently to them that doesn't mean anything. That's just like, oh, well, whatever, just another day in the office, another day in the park. It's just a big deal because he's better than Trump. And that's what they think. They think that since this guy, this fucking, establishment asshole who's made a ton of horrible decisions, a ton of horrible votes, supported policies that people shouldn't support, and they don't support. Majority of Americans don't support the things that Joe Biden is pushing for, even though they like him in the polls, because mainly he has name recognition. But even with all those things considered, people think that Joe Biden is the right choice, and it's crazy. And they don't even care about if he hires these Bush flunkies and stuff for his cabinet, or not cabinet, but for his thing. I wouldn't be surprised if he put in his cabinet if he is president, but for his kind of campaign team and stuff. So, and this is like the article even said, this is a giveaway to the this is like a kind of a wink wink nod to the military industrial complex, and giving them an idea like this is how Joe Biden as president would govern. He wouldn't change anything regarding the wars that we're in. He wouldn't, talking about, my support for the Iraq war is wrong and stuff. Like, yeah, you're saying this as a fucking Monday morning quarterback, very late Monday morning quarterback, but you're saying this way after that shit happened. And you think people are going to forgive you, but they're not. So progressives remember what Joe Biden stood for. We know he is a fake, not even fake progressive. He's just a fucking sellout, centrist, neoliberal Democrat, prick. That's all he really is. And people know that this guy he's not to be taken seriously. So Pete Buttigieg, another person that's running for president in the Democratic primary, he seems to be doing pretty decent in the polls, in the kind of, I guess, the general average of the polls that's being done. And he's also garnering a lot of celebrity donors, so celebrity donations and stuff from rich elitists and stuff in Hollywood, and as well as the CEOs of big banks, and then he puts the former the former executives from Goldman Sachs and stuff in his cabinet and stuff. So Pete Buttigieg he's just a pathetic sellout. I can't stand this guy, and he's doing more to, I guess you could call, rig the process a little bit more, and obviously trying to just get all the, get all his little tasks, done, take him off the checklist, and one of those things is superdelegates. And so according to this article, I'm going to read you guys, he is going out and trying to get the early support of superdelegates. Obviously the people that are going to be, they're part of the establishment, and those are the people that are going to basically hand over the election to the main establishment figure that is going to be doing, well. And as many of you guys remember, in 2016, Hillary Clinton got so much early support from superdelegates, and the media was reporting on it as if it was like legit, as they were counting those superdelegate votes in the tallies when they were showing, doing like their news reports and their segments and stuff. They were showing the superdelegates as actual votes that were already tallied. So they were saying, oh, well, these are the number of votes that Hillary Clinton has over Bernie Sanders, and they were counting the superdelegate votes. So they made all these, idiots and rubes out there that are watching these, mainstream media segments, and then convincing them that Hillary Clinton is ahead by, hundreds and hundreds of delegates when they're counting the superdelegates on top of the pledged delegates. And it was ridiculous. So people already those idiots must have already assumed that Hillary Clinton had won. So it was crazy, and I honestly wouldn't be surprised if they do the same thing this time. I just don't think they're going to be able to get away with it as easily, and the media's going to know that they're going to get caught for that, especially if, Bernie's campaign and stuff, calls them out for that and shit. So, and maybe maybe Tulsi Gabbard or something will do the same thing. We'll see, but I know Bernie Sanders, considering how much he's gone after the media, mainstream media and stuff, for how they've covered things, and especially covering him, I'm sure he'll call them out for that. And to an extent, they did that in 2016 too, but they'll do it even harder this time. So, and that's something he definitely should be doing. But I want to read you guys this article about Pete Buttigieg trying to kind of garner this support from superdelegates, and we'll discuss it as we read along. So the article is from AP News, apnews.com. It says Buttigieg ramps up outreach to Democratic superdelegates. And the body of the article is very, very short. And it says, this is apparently in Des Moines, Iowa. It says Pete Buttigieg is ramping up his outreach to the Democratic Party superdelegates with a phone call to them outlining the scope of his 2020 presidential campaign. The outreach suggests Buttigieg's campaign is looking beyond the early primary states to the possibility of a convention fight for the nomination. Superdelegates, who include Democratic National Committee members, elected officials, and other party dignitaries, have historically held an outsized influence over the nominating process. Top members of his staff introduced themselves Monday, with campaign manager Mike Schmuhl saying the campaign now employs 240 staffers, 37% of whom are people of color and 28% of whom are LGBTQ. A majority are women. The South Bend, Indiana mayor says he sees a, quote, great opportunity, end quote, in being relatively unknown because, quote, we've got a lot of room to grow, end quote. Yeah, so, that's, first of all, when it comes to the whole thing that he's doing with superdelegates, that's not surprising at all. He's obviously, these establishment types are going to try and get the support of these people as quickly as possible. They're going to try to get that support as out of the way, right? Get it off that checklist so that they can, they don't have to worry about it later, because they know that's going to put them over the top to win. And like I said, in 2016, that's what got Hillary Clinton the win, and I guarantee Pete Buttigieg is looking at this. He's looking at this the same way Hillary Clinton did, and Hillary Clinton probably actually did it earlier than this. I wouldn't be surprised. And the ironic thing, by the way, you got to remember, the ironic thing is that Pete Buttigieg, he actually ran for the head of the DNC against like Tom Perez and Keith Ellison and stuff in after 2016. So in 2017, when obviously Debbie Wasserman Schultz got ousted, she basically resigned, I think if I remember correctly, and then Donna Brazile was put in as the interim chair of the DNC, so they had to find a new DNC chair. Eventually, they went with Tom Perez. But within those people that were running was Tom Perez, Keith Ellison, Pete Buttigieg. So my guess is, honestly, now that I think about it, you put two and two together, he probably has a lot of good relationships with heads of the DNC and party kind of establishment types who are also very friendly with the DNC. So he is trying to garner that support so that he can, obviously get ahead. But it's almost like he has a little bit of a leg up because he's able to, he has the relationships, possibly, I'm just guessing, but he possibly has these relationships with these people in the DNC when he, decided to run. And, I don't think the things that he was pushing for was as bad as they are right now, but it was probably close enough. And even so, it doesn't matter because now his policies have gone much more to the right when it comes to what he advocates for and the fact that he is willing to be much more of a shill for the establishment, and like I said, hiring the people that he did for, that used to work for Goldman Sachs and all that stuff. So he's clearly willing to sell himself, sell his soul to get what he wants, and that's not something that he's shying away from. Clearly, I mean, at the end of the day, these guys like Pete Buttigieg, they don't really care about being principled and doing the things that's going to be better for the country or the people in this country. He wants to do what's going to be beneficial for him, right? He's going to do the things that he knows that ultimately helps his political ambitions, right? And the things that he knows that can get him ahead. And if he has to sell out to Goldman Sachs, former Goldman Sachs employees and hire them on his campaign, just like, Joe Biden goes and hires former Bush officials. If these people have to do these things, they're going to do it. They do it not carelessly, but they do it kind of heartlessly and just like, they don't give a shit. They're just like, who cares? You have an issue with it, then fuck off, basically. That's what it seems to be that they kind of believe. They just don't really give a damn if people have issues with it, because they're like, oh, well, don't worry, I'm a good person. I'm not as bad as Trump, right? I'm not a racist and a sexist and a misogynist, white supremacist, whatever you want to call him. We're not that bad. We're a lot better than that asshole. See, that's how low the bar is. The bar is so incredibly and pathetically low that they're willing to be like, it's as if like they're using that as, pretending as if that's like a legitimate excuse because you're not as bad as Trump. So, yeah, but when it comes to somebody like Buttigieg, you can't trust this guy. He's a total sleazeball. I just don't. I look at him, Beto O'Rourke, I look at obviously Joe Biden. These kind of people, they just they don't care for any kind of. They don't care for having principles. Excuse me. They don't care about standing up for things that are truly right. They claim to, but they don't really do it. They just do it to some tiny, small extent that is going to make them whatever the nominee for this party. But at the end of the day, they're not going to truly stand up and be like, okay, this is, I'm standing up for, let's say, unions. I'm standing up for the rights for unions to get better wages and, to get treated better by their employers and, Medicare for all and, tuition-free college, a living wage, kind of the same things that Bernie Sanders does, ending the wars like Bernie Sanders tells Tulsi Gabbard do, those kind of things, regulating Wall Street. These aren't, they a lot of times what they do is, as many of you guys know, is these politicians, the sleazy ones, they put, Kamala Harris is the same exact way. Everything that they say, they put everything into terms of very vague terms. Everything is very kind of just like, you don't give too many details. You just give a little bit of details. You give a little bit of, facts and kind of the things that you stand for. And they put very little stuff out there for you to, because they don't want to commit to anything 100%. Which, okay, fine. If you don't want to be 100% for something, fine. But they're not even close to 100%. They're 50%, you know? And they don't put out all the stuff out there for you to truly understand what their position is. Because ultimately what their positions are going to be to sell out. They want to be sellouts. That's what they are. They're sellouts to the establishment. That's why they are sellouts to the establishment. That's what they believe in, because that's who they are. They are the establishment. They're part of the establishment. And they need to do the bidding of the people that are going to pay their, not pay their bills, but basically pay for their existence in this system, right? So the people that are like, the donors, the people that give to their super PACs, the people that do fundraisers for them and stuff, these are the people that they have to suck up to. They can't suck up to the regular people like you and me, or the people out there that are going to rallies and, asking them, legitimate questions and stuff. When somebody like Kamala Harris gets asked, Kamala Harris or Pete Buttigieg and all these people get asked legitimate questions, they end up putting their foot in their mouths and they say things that it just, doesn't make any sense, or it's just ridiculous. And it's, it's totally like, it, causes them to essentially, like make another gaffe, essentially, which a lot of them end up doing. And when it comes to the actual progressives out there that are, really truly have principles, those people don't need to make gaffes. They don't make gaffes. Those people, because the reason why somebody like Bernie Sanders doesn't make gaffes, he might be a little bit too honest sometimes, but, as far as saying just whatever he's saying, just kind of, shooting from the hip and stuff. But when, sometimes when Bernie Sanders might make a so-called gaffe, he's just being too honest. But all these other people, they make gaffes because they don't believe in anything. So, and they don't have a principled view of, issue X or issue Y or issue Z. And they have to go out there and they have to say what's going to please their donors, what's going to please the establishment, what's going to please certain people in those, let's say, those crowds that they're speaking to from that state. Because that's what happened to what's her name, to Kamala Harris. Kamala Harris made a she made her now infamous statement during the first debate with Joe Biden, when she called him out for supporting, for being anti-busing, and working with white segregationists. And she, called him out for that, and she said, I was one of the I was one of those little girls that, benefited from busing during that time. And then what does she do when she goes to, I think it was Iowa or somewhere? She was giving a speech to people and said, no, I don't. I'm sorry. What I wanted to say was that after making that statement in the debate with Biden, she said, I support federally mandated busing. So federally mandated busing was something that she put her foot down and said, this is what I support. But then when she gave this speech in Iowa or wherever it was, and I talked about this on my show too, she was talking to a crowd of people and she says, no, I don't support federally mandated busing. I think those things should be decided by the district or the state or something like that. So all of a sudden she's not into federally mandated busing because she's talking to a crowd or talking to an audience or people that don't support that. So she believes like, you know what, I should probably tone down my my rhetoric and not say things that maybe this specific crowd of maybe more white people, they might not support that. So I should tone it down and say something a little bit, it's a little bit different, because it's not that different. She still believes in, mandating busing, but she wants it to be done by the states. Did the media ever call her out for that? No. That one outlet, I think, may have been AP too as well. AP News as well. I think they were the only ones who reported on it, but they never called, she never got called out for it. No. Did the show on MSNBC call her out for that? Did, any MSNBC hosts criticize her? Did Joyanne Reid say anything? Did Zerlina Maxwell say anything? No. They didn't say that because they don't care. They don't care that she has a position that's not consistent, especially when it comes to an issue that she's apparently so passionate about. But all of a sudden now she's just switching on that because she knows she's talking to a different, constituency of people, and then she needs to cater to them. And that's fine if you want to do that on principle, if you want to cater to a specific constituency when you're representing that state. But this is just a speech she's giving. So why don't you just give the same kind of speech you did during the debate? Do you think nobody watched the debate? And that's the thing. That's what somebody like Kamala Harris does. Pete Buttigieg, when it comes to him, he does the same exact thing. And I guarantee you, when he's talking to these superdelegates, he's not saying the same exact thing he's saying in a speech to a bunch of regular people. When he's going and talking to the superdelegates, he's saying what they want to hear. He does this. He's guaranteed he's doing the same exact thing in fundraisers and other speeches that he's giving to rich assholes and CEOs and stuff like that. And that's what he does. And Pete Buttigieg doesn't care about regular people. He cares about doing the things that's going to benefit the well-to-do off and the people that are the super rich people that are funding his campaign, and the people that don't want to get their taxes raised and stuff. That's why he's getting support from rich donors and elitist celebrity donors, and those are the people that Pete Buttigieg is going to represent. We have another article here from a mainstream publication I want to read for you guys. This one's from the New York Times, and it's another opinion piece I want to share with you guys because I found it very interesting and maddening at the same time. So this is a piece from somebody named Roger Cohen. Apparently he's a New York Times columnist or opinion writer or whatever. And he was basically making his point for why Kamala Harris is the candidate that should face Trump, so should be the nominee, and why she thinks that why he thinks that Kamala Harris can beat Trump. So the title of the piece is from the New York Times once again. Excuse me. The title of the piece is "The Who Can Beat Trump Test Leads to Kamala Harris." And then the subheadline says, "Bringing the energy and hope to stare down Trump and his movement." And this was from August 2nd, so it was a while ago. But I was actually going to cover it on the last episode, but I couldn't get around to it. But I thought it was still relevant to today. So let's check this out here. It says, "Nations, like people, may change somewhat, but not in their essential characteristics. The United States is defined by space and hope. It is an optimistic country of can-do strivers. They took the risk of coming to a new land. They are suspicious of government, inclined to self-reliance. Europeans ask where you came from. Americans ask what you can do. The Declaration of Independence posited a universal idea, that human beings are created equal, that they are endowed with certain inalienable rights, and that among these are, quote, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Americans then embraced an idea, however flawed in execution, when they became a nation. Their government, whatever else it does, exists to safeguard and further that idea in the United States and beyond. President Trump, in the name of making America, making America great again, has trampled on America's essence. He is angry, a stranger to happiness, angrier still for not knowing the source of his rage. He is less interested in liberty than the cash of his autocratic cronies. As for life, he views it as a selective right, to which the white Christian male has priority access with women, people of color, and the rest of humanity trailing along behind for scraps. Adherence to an agenda of, quote, national conservatism held a conference last week in Washington dedicated, as my colleague Jennifer Schussler put it, quoting her, it says, to wresting a coherent ideology out of the chaos of the Trumpist movement. Good luck with that. One of the meeting's leading lights was Rich Lowry, the editor of National Review. Lowry's forthcoming book is called, quote, The Case for Nationalism. That's a questionable title, to say the least. Enough said. The endpoint of that case is on display at military cemeteries across Europe. Nationalism, self-pitying and aggressive, seeks to change the present in the name of an illusory past in order to create a future vague in all respects except its glory. Trump is a self-styled nationalist. The USA, USA, USA chants at his rallies have chilling echoes. Lowry holds that America is not an idea, and to call it so is a lazy cliche. This argument denies the essence of the country, an essence palpable at every naturalization ceremony across the United States. Becoming American is a process that involves the inner absorption of the nation's founding idea. The gravest thing Trump has done is to empty this idea of meaning. His has been an assault on honesty, decency, dignity, tolerance, and civility. On this president's wish list, every right is alienable, not inalienable. He leads a movement more than he does a nation, and so depends on fear to mobilize people. Any victorious Democratic Party candidate in 2020 has to counter the negative energy with the positive energy that lifts Americans from Trump's web. I watched the Democratic Party debates among presidential contenders through a single prism. Who can beat Trump? In the end, nothing else matters, because another 5.5 years of this will drag Americans into an abyss of moral collapse. It says, yes, how far left, how moderate that candidate may be is of some significance, but can he or she bring the heat and the hope to stare Trump down and topple him is all I care about. So it does anything, barely nothing has to do with policy so far. I haven't seen a single policy here. It says that's the bouncing ball all eyes should be on, with no illusions as to how vicious and devious Trump will be between now and November 2020. It says, with reluctance, because he is good and honorable man of great personal courage, I do not believe that Joe Biden has the needed energy, mental agility, and nimbleness, nor do I believe that the nation of can-do strivers I described above is ready for Bernie Sanders' democratic socialism. Okay, so we know where this guy is going. Forms of socialism work in Europe, and the word is widely misunderstood, God forbid, in America. But socialism and America's essence are incompatible. Elizabeth Warren's couching of a campaign for radical change as, quote, economic patriotism is a much smarter way to go, big surprise, and her energetic advocacy of ideas to redress the growing injustices in American life has been powerful. Still, I am not convinced that enough Americans are ready to move as far left as she proposes, or that she passes the critical commander-in-chief test. Kamala Harris does that for me. So this is where we're going to get into the standing and the fawning over Kamala Harris. The California senator is a work in progress with uneven debate performances and policy, notably healthcare that she has zigzagged toward defining. But she's tough, broadly of the center, has a great American story, is passionate on issues including immigrants, African Americans, and women, and has proved she is not averse to risk. She has a former prosecutor's toughness and the ability to slice through Trump's self-important bluster. Last month, Harris said Trump was a predator. She continued, quoting her, "The thing about predators you should know is that they prey on the vulnerable. They prey on those who they do not believe are strong. And the thing you must importantly know, predators are cowards." Those were important words. It's early days, but Trump's biggest electoral vulnerability is to women. They have seen through his misogyny at last, and they know just where the testosterone of nationalism leads. So another lazy, substanceless article from the mainstream media. I haven't read too many articles where opinion columnists endorse and do these kind of things for specific politicians, but clearly this person has endorsed And obviously he doesn't represent the New York Times, but he has clearly endorsed Kamala Harris. I'm pretty sure the New York Times has no problem with Kamala Harris because they are part of the establishment. But this guy, it took him how many let's read how many, not sentences, but how many paragraphs it took him to finally get to addressing some sort of substance. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Was it 13? 13 out of 14. I'm sorry, 13 out of 15 paragraphs it took for this guy to finally get into some sort of substance, because that's where he, addressed the policies that she supports as far as immigrants and African Americans, but then the guy didn't even really say anything about it. He said in fact he didn't really do her much. Didn't do him much of a favor here, saying that her healthcare policies, she's zigzagged towards defining them. But then he also says that, what did he say here? He said that she's a work in progress with uneven debate performances, and that's when he mentions, her healthcare kind of views and stuff not being kind of zigzagging through and everything toward defining them. But then he pretends that she's so wonderful because she's passionate about issues including immigrants. I don't even understand that. African Americans, so you're talking about all the African Americans that she's put into jail for stupid ass reasons, like doing drugs. Yeah, she's really been wonderful on that. On women, yeah, I guess she's pro women, but I mean, so is Bernie Sanders. What difference does it make? So is Elizabeth Warren. So is to some extent Joe Biden too. So, and then, and he dresses her, Trump was a predator, or Trump is a predator, part of her speech, that was her closing statement that she made in was it the last debate, I think? It was ridiculous. It's so stupid. But do you see what she's running on? At least in that respect, I guess what she's trying to say that she's not running on, but in that respect, what she's saying though is she's saying, "Oh my God, Donald Trump is so scary. He's a serial, adulterer and a serial, because he's also been accused of rape and stuff. He's a serial rapist, and he's this, and, he's such a horrible person." I mean, I don't disagree with those things, but it's like that has nothing to do with policy. It's just about somebody, you're just trying to fearmonger about a guy that's president. It's really, really scary. Now, you can make the case that people say that about Bill Clinton too, and because he's obviously involved in a lot of sexual assault scandals, whether it was, not even so much sexual assault, just adultery altogether, where he obviously had sexual relations with Monica Lewinsky, and then he was accused of sexual assault by multiple other people. Trump has been accused of sexual assault by many women. It was like 17 women or something, and especially getting accused of sexual assault by Stormy Daniels, the former porn star. So yeah, we know he's a predator. We know he's a sexual assaulter. We know he's an adulterer. We know he's a sleazeball. We know he's a scumbag. That has nothing to do with policy. And obviously this guy he pretty much admits that Kamala Harris's policies are not that great and says she's a work in progress. So obviously you don't give a shit about policy. You just want somebody that is a tough prosecutor. A really tough prosecutor that's going to look Trump in the eye and act really, really tough and tell him he's a terrible person. Okay, thanks a lot. That doesn't do anything. That has nothing to do with policy. Does nothing for policy. It does nothing for dealing with real situations in this world. Of course, we have a lot of sexual predators and assaulters and rapists and all that stuff in this world, and those people obviously should be condemned and hated, but that has nothing to do with Trump. I mean, that's a completely separate, so, when you're addressing Trump as a predator, all you're doing is just scaring people about how terrible Trump is without actually getting into the details. So you could talk about so many issues about how Trump is terrible. The tax cuts to his, to the super rich that he gave, the wanting to renegotiate NAFTA 2.0, wanting to, basically do another version of the TPP. Essentially, he's putting TPP ideas into the, into NAFTA. He's, going on. He's having a trade war with China right now. He's, his healthcare policy sucks. He doesn't give a shit about, obviously, raising wages for people that are, raising wages for workers. He continues the drug war. He's continuing the fucking endless wars, the 7 or 8 endless wars we're in right now. Do you mention any of that? No, because Kamala Harris doesn't care about those things. And like I said, obviously this guy doesn't give a shit about Kamala Harris not caring about her own policies because she's not putting them forward. And if she does, they suck. But he just cares about her being really tough and, being able to look Trump in the eye and, addressing his slicing through his self-important bluster. Like, dude, it's amazing how terrible mainstream media has gotten with their, I don't know, with their endorsements and their ideas and their mentality. It gets worse and worse every day. Every year, every day, every election, every midterm, every presidential election, it just gets worse and worse and worse. These people have their heads up their asses, and they just don't give a fuck about pushing ideas and pushing, politicians. Like I said, these opinion guys, the opinion writers and stuff, a lot of times don't come out and just like endorse somebody. But this is, and it's fine. It's an opinion piece. It's not representing New York Times. But they come out with these opinion pieces, and the rare times, I guess, that you specifically see, I don't know, maybe I'm wrong, but this is not, I haven't seen too many opinion writers come out and just say, oh, this person is wonderful, unless like it's down to like 2. So if it's down to like 2 politicians in a race and, Democrat against Republican, I that's a different story. But when it comes to like still being in the primary, I don't think I've ever seen an opinion writer like this, especially a guy that has been writing for the New York Times since 2009, apparently. His name is Roger Cohen. He sounds very familiar. Looks very familiar too. But anyway, you don't see a lot of these people doing these things. But again, if they do it, they don't do it this early. And it's very surprising to see this guy see somebody doing this so early. But then when he writes the article, he's so like, his argument is so incoherent and bad. It's like it doesn't make any sense. Like, who's convinced by this? Obviously, a lot of Kamala stans and people that love Kamala Harris love it, but it just doesn't make any decent arguments. Especially when if anything, you're not making Kamala Harris look any better when you're saying that, she had uneven debate performances and, she's a work in progress, and regarding her policies, notably healthcare, and she's zigzagged toward defining them, like, and then but she's great because she's a tough prosecutor. And then, obviously Trump is hated by women out there, women voters, hated by African Americans and immigrants. Oh, she's wonderful on those issues. Dude, Kamala Harris has embraced ICE, has embraced like what ICE has done. So the immigration, customs, and border agents and all those people that are rounding up all these kids and immigrants and throwing them into these fucking ridiculous detention centers and shit, treating them like fucking animals, basically. She's embraced the work of those, ICE and the border agents and everything. In fact, there's a famous picture of her, well, not famous, but I mean, I don't know. It's something that's gone around through, the progressive Twitter and social media a lot, of her taking a picture wearing an ICE jacket or a border agent or ICE jacket, where she's, standing there with a bunch of border agents and I think it's border agents. She's standing there with border agents and like smiling, taking a picture all in front of the wall too, if I remember correctly. I went against the border wall there, between Mexico and Texas, and she's standing there taking a picture, happy go lucky, happy as can be, just as if it's like no problem. But now she's we have to be convinced that she's wonderful on the issue of immigration. Yeah, get the fuck out of here. There was another story that I wanted to actually do last week too, and I was unable to do that back then, in last week's episode. So I decided to bring it up with you guys this time. So this is an article from Politico, and it talks about how Elizabeth Warren was actually considering being Hillary Clinton's VP when she was obviously the nominee for the Democratic Party after that horribly rigged primary, and against Bernie Sanders. And she wanted to be Hillary Clinton's VP. And she actually says she would have accepted the offer if Clinton would have given it to her. Now, reports have come out, and I think this is something that Kyle Kulinski said on his show when he covered this story, and he said that she was being considered, but people had said, like, hey, if you do this, if you go with Elizabeth Warren, who's too left wing and too far left, blah blah, if you do that, we're not going to endorse you or give you money as far as like donors and stuff. So this was coming from like the corporate donors and the Wall Street establishment stuff. People were telling her that because at this time in 2016, Elizabeth Warren was much more anti Wall Street, anti-establishment. Right now, she's not as anti-establishment and anti-Wall Street as she used to be. Now, her policies may be like that, but she has a much more friendly rapport with Wall Street nowadays compared to back then. And they didn't want her to be chosen as VP, and that's why Hillary Clinton ended up being stupid enough to go with a fucking white guy like Tim Kaine, who's the senator from Virginia. Horrible choice. The guy he's got the personality of a fucking wet dish towel. So, and his policies are right wing basically. He's a right wing Democrat basically, and she's going with him is honestly not that surprising. And as Kyle said in his segment, he believes that she chose him because, and maybe reports came out, I believe that that she ended up going with Tim Kaine in 2016 because she saw that as like, oh, I have to go back to the center, right? I have to go back to choose somebody moderate. He's not even really moderate, but choose somebody moderate that's going to, appeal to those people in those red states, essentially, because he's Virginia. Virginia is a pretty red state. And so he decided to do that. She decided to do that because she knew that, like, she needed to please the donors. And if she went with anybody else, I mean, all the other choices, there was clearly a lot of choices back then too as well, as much as there is right now as well. But she wanted to go the route that she thought was going to make her more popular among moderates instead of progressives. So as usual, Democrats spit in the eye of the progressives, the progressive base, and don't give a shit about them, and they're probably going to do that this time too if it ends up being an establishment candidate that wins the nominee this time as well. So he or she will definitely pick an establishment choice for VP. So let's read the article here. It's not too long. Just wanted to go through this and so you guys can get a better idea of exactly what went on. So this is from Politico. Excuse me. It says, Warren, I would have accepted a VP offer from Clinton. And let's see here. It says Elizabeth Warren would have accepted an offer from Hillary Clinton to become her running mate in 2016. The Massachusetts senator and 2020 White House hopeful said in a report published Thursday. Warren, who declined to launch her own presidential bid 2.5 years ago despite intense efforts by progressives to draft her, even received a, quote, full vetting for the vice presidential slot by Clinton's team and was interviewed at the candidate's Whitehaven mansion in Washington, according to Bloomberg Businessweek. Clinton seriously weighed Warren as a potential running mate, the report states, and top aide Phil Brains wrote in a memo to his boss after their meeting. Quoting him here, it says, if a crystal ball said she wouldn't antagonize you for 4 years, it's hard to argue she isn't the most helpful for the next 4 months to get you elected. So I guess that's referring to Warren as not just, I guess, a surrogate, but also VP. Yeah, because they run essentially. So after the primary, they have 4 months where they're running in the general election. It says, asked whether she would have agreed to become Clinton's number 2 on the ticket, Warren responded yes. During the 2016 campaign, Warren controversially opted not to back Clinton's chief primary challenger, fellow liberal Senator Bernie Sanders of Vermont, and went on to endorse Clinton in June of that year after the former Secretary of State had secured enough delegates to capture her party's nomination. Clinton ultimately selected Virginia Senator Tim Kaine as her running mate. Warren and Sanders are currently competing in the 2020 Democratic presidential race, battling each other and roughly 24 other candidates, including the frontrunner, former Vice President Joseph Biden. The pair of progressive lawmakers consistently rank within the top 5 choices of primary voters, along with Biden, Kamala Harris, California Senator Kamala Harris, and Mayor Pete Buttigieg of South Bend, Indiana. Their fight for voters, aligned with the party's left flank, has the potential to dominate the second Democratic debate next week in Detroit, where they will stand beside each other at center stage on the first night of the forums. So that's really concerning, I get the idea of wanting to be a VP in general, and I think Kyle made this case on his thing, and he said, I don't know if he made it when he did this segment, but about this issue, but he has said in the past that the idea of having a progressive voice in the room, in other words, in the case of VP, so a VP being, so the progressive being a VP for a more establishment type candidate. He thinks that's a good idea. Now, I can see that argument, and I can understand how somebody would say that, and it makes sense. But it's just so weird to have somebody being in cahoots with the likes of Hillary Clinton, especially a progressive. Anybody really. I mean, anybody, when you see anybody being in cahoots with Hillary Clinton, you're like, ugh. It just makes you sick to your stomach because it's Hillary Clinton. Same thing with Joe Biden and stuff like that too. So, but this, if anything, this just says more about Elizabeth Warren. The fact that she would take that pick, it's unfortunate because when you're the VP, you don't do you do the things that the president does not want to do, and this is something I famously got from this documentary I watched one time. It's this great show. It's called Frontline. It's on PBS. I have some of the DVDs where they cover really important issues regarding past presidential administrations and stuff. And one of the people that appeared on this episode of Frontline from 2007, it was a documentary about Dick Cheney. And Dick Cheney, who, of course, was the VP to George W. Bush. And apparently Dick Cheney, when he was the VP going into being the VP, so it was before the inauguration, days before the inauguration happened to inaugurate, President Bush and, George Bush and Dick Cheney into their respective, positions. Dick Cheney had a meeting with former Vice President under George H.W. Bush, Dan Quayle. So Cheney met with Dan Quayle, and apparently, according to this person, his name is Barton Gellman, or Barton Gellman, I think is, I always say Gellman, but Barton Gellman, he's a very, very good writer, and he takes very strong stances on national security issues and, illegal surveillance, illegal spying and whatnot. So, and he's the author of a book that I have up here. It's titled Angler, the Cheney Vice Presidency, and it's a very, very good book from 2008 or 9. And but Gellman made the remark in his little kind of short kind of part when he appeared on that episode of Frontline, and he said that. He recounted that the conversation that Dan Quayle, former George H.W. Bush vice president, had with the incoming vice president, Dick Cheney, that, hey, listen, Dick, when you're the vice president, what you're doing is your job is boring. You're going to go out there and you're going to give speeches at events that that the president doesn't have time for. You're going to go to like funerals of dead soldiers. Sounds terrible. And, you're going to do all these things that the president doesn't have time for. He's got to go and handle all different kinds of issues and matters that, that are really important. And you're going to be his kind of like his lackey. You're going to be like his obviously his number two. Obviously that's as they refer to as number two. You're literally going to be his number two. You're going to be doing what he doesn't want to do. And apparently in that interview, in that meeting that Quayle had with Dick Cheney, according to Gelman, he said Dick Cheney told Dan Quayle, no, me and President Bush, me and George, we have a different agreement. And then, when you think about it like that, you're like, wow. And when you look at what the vice presidency of Dick Cheney was, and as Barton Gelman explains in his book, the vice presidency of Dick Cheney, as many people know, was one of very just completely overhauling the entire national security state and the national security platform of this country. In other words, whether it's under Republicans or Democrats, the existence of the United States in the war on terror, illegal surveillance, kind of moving the chess pieces around the chessboard and focusing on having a more powerful stance in the world where America, the United States, is the main superpower, and they have all the power, and they're the ones that run everything. They're the most powerful, as everybody says, the most powerful country on earth. This was the goal of Dick Cheney as vice president. And when he says, I have a different agreement with George W. Bush, this is what I wanted to do. This is what he wanted to do. But that's kind of the different point because I'm going off on a tangent here but I just thought that was a really interesting point. But it shows you that when you are the VP, though, you are not going to do the main things you're doing unless your superior, the president, tells you as VP unless you're going to be doing something, if you have a different agreement with him like Dick Cheney had, you're going to be doing the boring ass things that is not going to involve. You're not going to be the last person that's going to be involved in that conversation. That might be what's perceived as the role of the vice president. But honestly, in all honesty, I don't think that's the case. I think that's more of an illusion. I think that's something that the media, mainstream media in Washington and the establishment tries to tell you. They tried to tell you like, no, totally, like that the VP, he's totally like the other person that's in the room, and the president is always going to ask the advice of the VP and wonder what they're going to say. I just don't believe that. I don't think that's true. And I mean, again, unless you have a different agreement like Dick Cheney had with George W. Bush, I just don't see that being the case. Because I think the choice of the VP is something. It's a opportunistic way for that specific politician, that person that's running, to tell people like, oh, the person I'm choosing, this is what kind of policies I'm going to be pushing for because I'm choosing this person. In reality, that's not the case because that person, again, doesn't have that much of a role. They're doing all the dirty work, essentially, all the boring ass shit that the president doesn't want to do. They're doing the work for them. So why would they be involved in all the policy conversations? I really highly doubt that. I don't think that's really true. And it's more of the perception of that person going towards that. It's symbolic, you know what I'm saying? It's something to make people think that this is what this person is going to do based on policy, when in my opinion, they're really not. And I mean, just listen, Barack Obama went with somebody. Obviously, he went with Joe Biden. Everybody thought that like Barack Obama was going to be this big progressive guy, and he really wasn't. Now, I don't think that was because of Joe Biden. And honestly, at the time, probably a lot of people thought Joe Biden was progressive too. That's the problem. But that didn't end up happening. So my point is that when you go with the politicians that people assume to be progressive or assume to be this or that, whatever they are, I don't know. Honestly, it seems like for Democrats, I mean, when they choose their vice presidents, honestly, they end up choosing horrible ones. I mean, look what Al Gore did. Al Gore went with Joe Lieberman. Joe Lieberman ended up being horrible. I mean, he just ended up being one of the worst politicians, even after he was chosen by Al Gore. Obviously, Al Gore won Florida he won not only Florida, he won the election by 500,000 votes, and that was one of obviously two presidential elections to feature involve the actual winner not being the winner based on the electoral vote. And obviously Hillary Clinton ended up winning the vote, the electoral the popular vote. Not the electoral vote, but the popular vote. She obviously ended up winning by 2.7 million votes over Trump. Gore, like I said, won it by roughly about 500,000 over George W. Bush, and but he still ended up losing it. But I believe that if he had not chosen Joe Lieberman, if he had actually chosen a real, legitimate progressive, again, as usual, if he had done that, then they would have actually won. Now, Joe Lieberman, yeah. So I mean, like, Al Gore would have probably been a very good president. I think we would have probably avoided 9/11 because we wouldn't have had. I don't think we would have had a president that would have been threatening, would have been pushing for, obviously the kind of imperialism and stuff that George W. Bush was pushing for. And I believe we would just be able to avoid it because, George W. Bush wanted to go to war. And I don't think Al Gore would have been on board with that as much. But you never know. But either way, he would have been a hell of a lot better than George W. Bush. And at the time, a lot of people are just like, God damn. That was just ridiculous. It was a ridiculous thing to have happen, where, this guy, you pick this guy that's he's just a right-wing prick, basically, and he ended up becoming like an independent. He ended up basically becoming like the best friends with John McCain, and he ended up shilling for a lot of right-wing positions. He hated the public option, and back in when Obama was pushing for it, he hated the idea of a legitimate progressive healthcare plan. So yeah, Joe Lieberman ended up being horrible. After that one, it was in 2004. John Kerry, he chose John Edwards, who wasn't that great. He ended up being like a fucking, what was he, cheating on his wife or something, and he was like an adulterer. Another one, among many other politicians. But yeah, Obama choosing Biden, it ended up being a decent choice for at the time, but he wasn't progressive like a lot of people claimed he was. Obama and Biden, both. They both ended up being right-wing, establishment types. And look what we ended up getting. We ended up getting Trump because Obama disappointed all the progressives with his centrism and his establishment ideas. And now we have to try and defeat him. We have to try and defeat Trump with an actual progressive this time instead of going with another establishment type like Biden, Kamala Harris, or whatever, Pete Buttigieg, all these people, we can't have these choices. These are not the right choices. And honestly, ultimately, I don't think Elizabeth Warren is the right choice either, because I think she's way too much of an opportunist. I've said this before. She's way too opportunist. She's way too, apparently all of a sudden friendly with the Wall Street types and stuff. And I don't know. I mean, now we find out she wanted to be Hillary Clinton's VP too. I mean, why would I want somebody like that? Why would I want somebody that would want to be the second in command to Hillary Clinton? That's just to me, that's another huge red flag for another non-Bernie Sanders or non-Tulsi Gabbard candidate. And I just can't accept that. I'm sorry. So, as is the case with the mainstream media and their obsession with Russiagate, this seems to be a never-ending nightmare where they just obsess over the Russian bots and Russian trolls that are involved in supposedly overthrowing our elections and creating, sowing racial division, all that shit. And apparently now they're involved in doxing too. So that's another thing that the establishment is fear-mongering about. So This is an article from NBC News. It's like their technology news or something. And they did an article here talking about how Russian trolls apparently are doxing people, and they're creating like racial, that whole like racial division kind of thing. So I want to read you guys this this piece here. Obviously, as I said, I'm getting sick of this Russiagate stuff, Russiagate hysteria, but I needed to report on this because I thought it was important to give you guys an idea of where the mainstream media is going with this kind of propaganda. So let's check this out here. So the title of this piece is Russia-linked Twitter accounts promoted doxing over racial tension videos. Okay, let's check out the body here now. It says, in October 2018, a cell phone video of a Brooklyn woman calling 911 to claim a 9-year-old black boy grabbed her rear when her ass went viral on social media, becoming one of a series of videos that activists and journalists seized upon as an example of the everyday racism by minorities in America, faced by minorities in America. That woman became known as Cornerstone Caroline. Other individuals who became the subjects of similar stories would be known by nicknames such as Basketball Becky or Taco Truck Tammy. I don't know about those other two. I know about the Cornerstone Caroline. I didn't remember it being referred to as Cornerstone. Her name or nickname being referred to as Cornerstone Caroline. I do remember that incident though. It says, now Clemson University researchers have found those videos received instrumental early social media promotion from inauthentic accounts, some of which have since been removed by Twitter and linked by U.S. intelligence to Russia's efforts to stoke racial tensions in America. Okay. The tweets by the suspicious accounts drew 50 to 90% of the initial retweets before the stories took off, an indication their content played a leading role in drumming up attention according to the researchers' pre-publication findings. Darren Linville, an associate professor of communications, and Patrick Warren, associate professor of economics, both at Clemson, identified more than 300 tweets from almost 30 suspicious Twitter accounts that appeared to look for and promote videos of racial tense incidents. Fundamentally, what they're trying to do is put a spotlight and rub salt in the wound of these divisive issues, Linville told NBC News, referring to the strategy of using social media to exacerbate racial tensions. The accounts reposted or tweeted the videos, framed the content as explicit discrimination, used emotionally loaded language, and employed calls to action, including encouraging people to publish the participants' personal information, a strategy known as doxing. The October 2018 video was promoted by @BLK Hermione, Hermione, okay, an account that has since been suspended for platform manipulation, according to a Twitter spokesperson. The account encouraged others to retweet the video until someone recognized the woman. 9 minutes later, the account retweeted the woman's phone number, among the first to do so online. The coordinated activity began in early 2018 and appeared to peak in the run-up to the midterm elections later that year, the researchers found. It's clear in several examples that some of these stories would never have gone viral without the influence of Russian disinformation. 3 of the accounts the researchers analyzed were taken down by Twitter in 2018 and this year for being part of or having the characteristics of Kremlin-linked disinformation operations. Twitter confirmed it suspended other accounts reported by the researchers for platform manipulation. Twitter removed 3 of the accounts analyzed by the researchers for being part of potential foreign influence operations. The other 3 accounts they're referring to are Jemi Shah's, JEMISHAAAZZZ, Sounds like a little bit of a troll account. Could be. I don't know. But it's not Russian. But okay. And another one is Canny Jackson. Kani Jackson. So 2 J's and then spelling Jackson. Maybe it's Canny J. Jackson, I guess. And the last one is Courtney Chante. QUARTNEY CHANTE. And then continuing on here, it says disinformation experts told NBC News that the goal of the inauthentic accounts is to highlight and inflame existing tensions to destabilize America, a strategy also used by Russian disinformation campaign leading up to the 2016 election. Yeah, right. The real goal is to get the conflict off Twitter, to get it to the streets. Philip Howard, director of the Oxford Internet Institute. Okay. The researchers said they placed the accounts as probably Russian in origin based on forensic analysis of account information and behavior that they shared with NBC News. A Twitter spokesperson said the company is fully committed to protect conversation around the 2020 elections and beyond. 3 stories that the accounts focused on followed a pattern. A video uploaded online showing a white person calling or threatening to call the authorities on a minority. The objects of the outrage were often given alliterative nicknames on the lines of Taco Truck Tammy or Basketball Becky. As the accounts promoted the videos, online outrage would build, along with calls to expose and promote the phone number, address, and other personal information of the person. Sometimes all the accounts added was a nudge, merely reposting a video and tweeting, "Twitter, do your thing." I've seen that too. I know people that I've seen multiple times on Twitter. Then they're still on Twitter right now that do that. So now they're going to try and get rid of those people now. Probably. It says some of the accounts tracked by the researchers were among the first group of accounts in conversation, providing a key early boost to a viral moment's lift, researchers say. The researchers, however, did not make any judgment on the veracity of the videos. In the case of Cornerstone Caroline, closed-circuit TV footage later showed the boy had accidentally made contact while walking past her. After the video racked up at least 18 million views and heaps of social media outrage, the woman Teresa Klein apologized. It says in at least one instance, one of the suspended accounts coined a nickname. In April, a Hispanic taco truck worker in Texas recorded and uploaded a video of a white woman threatening to call U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, which is ICE, after the truck was parked in front of her house. One of the suspicious accounts spotted by the researchers was the first to call her Taco Truck Tammy. Twitter, you know what to do. The account tweeted as it posted the video, which drew at least 16 million views and regional media coverage. Memes later shared the woman's full name, date of birth, phone number, and home address. The account is now suspended. According to the Clemson researchers' analysis, the suspicious accounts drew about half of the retweets of the encounter between the homeowner and the workers in the first 2 days. Despite takedowns by Twitter, the activity by the suspicious accounts continues. In July, inauthentic accounts spotted by the researchers helped the story of Basketball Becky to trend. I mean, listen, man, I've seen this kind of stuff happen forever. I've seen people that I still see on Twitter to this day doing these kind of things. It's not something that's totally outrageous and ridiculous and, not to be fair, doxing is not a good thing to do. I don't agree with doxing. I don't agree with people saying what the name of somebody is when we don't know what their name is. Now, I got accused of doxing after one of the town halls that featured Bernie Sanders, and I called out one of the people that was working for a lobbying group, a pro-Democrat lobbying group, where they asked a question about Bernie Sanders' supposed, I don't know, not supposed, but like the sexual assault that was going on in Bernie Sanders' campaign and how he supposedly hasn't addressed it. And one of the people that asked the question, her name appeared on the screen. Where she was, who she was working for, I believe appeared, and not who she went, where she went to school, I believe appeared, and I pointed this out on, on Twitter, and I talked about how she got rid of her Twitter handle or her Twitter account, and she got rid of her Facebook account and stuff. And then people accused me of doxing her, even though her name was already on there. Like I said, where she went to school was already on there and stuff like that. And apparently, she had already gotten rid of her Twitter account and other social media accounts before I ever even said anything. So people accusing me of doxing. I didn't dox anybody. I didn't dox the information that people didn't already know about, basically. So people already knew who this person was based on just CNN alone. CNN already put her name and all that stuff and whatever information about her, where she went to school and shit. So, if anything, the doxing, they shouldn't be, but is CNN accused, guilty of doxing somebody too? If, using the logic that I supposedly dox somebody, they should be accused of that too. So no, I don't agree with doxing. I don't agree with putting somebody's name out there that doesn't deserve to be exposed. However, the person did do a terrible thing. I just don't think that's something that should get them doxed, because then it ends up possibly putting their families at risk and, possibly putting them at risk of some sort of, violence or some sort of action being taken against them. At best, they should probably, be sued or something for saying the terrible things that they say to somebody, or I don't know, receiving some sort of punishment. But I don't think they should, be, receiving. It shouldn't be receiving death threats. Shouldn't be receiving. Unless you do some sort of like violent attack and you put that person's life in danger, then I can understand defending that person that got attacked by attacking them. That's something that any normal person would do. But again, I don't know. I don't believe in violence though, so I'm not an advocate for violence. So I'm an advocate against violence, or anti-violence, and I'm pro peace and non-violence. So I don't think that's right, and I don't think it's right when people do that. However, this is not the work of Russians. This is not something Russians are doing. Like I said, I'm still already seeing that, from people. I see people doing that all the time. They're always, trying to dox or put this person's information out there and stuff too. And like I mentioned multiple examples of this happening, where it did, and it's not. Listen, when it comes to like people being exposed for doing shitty things, if they get exposed for it, that's one thing. Like, I just worry about the whole idea of doxing them, as like I said, getting their families and friends and shit involved. But if it involves them, then that's fine. To some extent, it's understandable to put them in that situation where they get put on blast, essentially. And when that happens, then you shouldn't have done that then, right? You shouldn't have done something fucked up in front of a camera and gotten yourself so much attention. I can post the article for you guys on in the description box, because I give several examples about how people have been doxed when it was unnecessary, and also when it was possibly, some people feel it was necessary. And that's something that I wanted to kind of talk about and have a conversation with, and it seems like some people appreciated that. And but ultimately, when it comes down to it, all this stuff about Russians and fear mongering about people, the Russians doing all this stuff, it's baseless. It's totally baseless, and there is no proof behind it. It's just another way for people's free speech rights to be taken away. Because ultimately, when it comes down to like, posting these things on Twitter or whatever, giving these nicknames to Twitter and stuff, aside from the doxing, which I don't agree with, but like exposing these accounts and saying like, oh, look what this person did, and like saying, this person did something fucked up, whatever. And then, the doxing, up until the doxing point is, it's fine. But once it gets to the doxing part of it, it's not that good. But the rest of it is fine, though. Like, exposing this person as saying something fucked up and doing something fucked up, there's nothing wrong with that. That's part of your free speech rights, right? And that person also has free speech rights to say what they want, but that doesn't mean that people don't have the rights to expose you when you do those things. And that's what people did. And to characterize it as this Russian plot is just typical fear-mongering and a way to restrict our free speech rights. And that's something I really, really care about, and I'm very, very passionate about. And that's why I consider myself a constitutional progressive, because I believe in the Constitution. I believe in everybody's free speech rights and having the ability to say what you want without being silenced and being told to shut up. And linking it to Russia and Putin and all this stuff is just, I'm so fucking sick of it. I'm so tired of these propagandists, these propaganda outlets. And this is why social media, that's why new media is getting bigger. New media like myself and Kyle Kalinske and Tim Black, Jimmy Dore, that's why we're getting bigger, because we're the people that are giving the actual commentary that people want to hear, not something from NBC News or CNN or, Fox News, all these bullshit channels that just spout misinformation and bullshit and, shill for the establishment. This is typical establishment, shilling and kind of doing their dirty work. They want to do the dirty work of these establishment types out there, so they can shut everybody up and put more surveillance on people too, and then start calling everybody Russian. That's why everybody getting called Russian is so fucking huge now among these Democratic loyalists. So everybody's a Russian and everybody's a this, and honestly it comes off as very xenophobic too, which is crazy. And people are just like, well, if you're Russian, you must be a terrible person. Like, so anybody that's Russian is bad. That's how crazy it's become, and that's what it is. And I can't stand it. And I'm definitely somebody that's, calling these motherfuckers out and saying that what you're doing is not right, because ultimately what you're doing is not only fear-mongering, but you're also, you're marginalizing Russian people, literally Russian people. And anybody that's a Russian is can get criticized, not only criticized, can get like I said, marginalized and treated as like a terrible person because they're Russian, and God forbid they're not fully in support of the Democratic Party. Even if you're not Russian, you're called a Russian, and then you're like, oh, you don't love whatever Kamala Harris or some Democrat stands for, you must be a Russian. I mean, it's so absurd. And this conversation has been taken to its to its fucking dead end, and it's at a dead end. They still refuse to give up on it. Even after Russiagate was disproved, Robert Mueller found no evidence of actual Russia, interference or anything. All of it was just sending a bunch of memes and posting them on Twitter and shit, and now they're saying this is part of it, and this whole, like, doxing of people, all of a sudden, now everybody's a Russian now. I'm so fucking tired of this bullshit. The establishment is trying to silence us, and we need to fight back against that, and we can't allow this to happen. All right, guys, that's going to be the end of our show today. Thank you so much for joining me. It was great having you guys. Before I get going here, just wanted to let you know, please check out my Patreon page, patreon.com/ProgBlacksmith. If you could become a patron and give me a generous contribution, it would be greatly appreciated. Also, don't forget, if you want more information about this podcast, check out #TheProgSquare on Twitter. That will direct you to all of my live broadcasts on Periscope, as well as every segment I post on YouTube. So if you could do that, I would really appreciate it. So for my Periscope viewers and my Facebook viewers, I really appreciate you checking me out today. This has been another episode of The Progressive Square, and we will see you next week. Take care, everybody.